The street was calm and peaceful late at night. Suddenly, the calm was broken by a noise. What happened next was shockingly violent and seemed carefully planned. The most troubling part was that she had warned others about the possibility of this event, but no one intervened. Alessandra Mattuzzi was born and raised in Italy and spent most of her life in the fashion industry. At 56, she worked as a sales representative for a boutique specializing in women's clothing. Those who knew her well described her as reliable, thoughtful, and elegant. She approached every task with precision and grace, whether assisting a customer or caring for a loved one. Alessandra was particularly known for her deep compassion. Her sense of duty went beyond her job. She had been her father's main caregiver during his final illness, providing unwavering support until his death. This experience left her emotionally exhausted. Afterward, she became withdrawn, avoiding social interactions and hesitating to form new relationships. Alessandra's daily life centered around her mother, who lived in a care home and needed constant care. She followed a regular routine that included frequent visits to her mother and daily phone calls with her younger sister, Stefania, with whom she had a strong bond. Although Alessandra was reserved, she maintained an online presence that showcased her life. Her social media accounts featured images of family gatherings, stylish work outfits, and quiet moments with her pet. She preferred calm environments and meaningful relationships over large social events. Everything changed in the summer of 2021 when she encountered a young man named Giovanni Padovani on social media. Giovanni, aged 27, was originally from Sicily. He lived an active lifestyle as a professional football player and part-time model. His social media was lively and well followed, showcasing training sessions, travel adventures, and insights into photo shoots. His online persona was polished and charismatic, earning him admiration from many, particularly women. His friendly, approachable demeanor suggested he was both confident and down-to-earth. Despite their age difference, Alessandra and Giovanni connected easily from the start. Giovanni was respectful and kind, showing no signs of arrogance. As time went on, their messages became more frequent, transitioning from simple greetings to deeper conversations about their lives and feelings. Their digital exchanges developed into genuine emotional connections, and they began communicating almost daily. They sharing photos, life updates, and words of support. Eventually, Giovanni planned a visit to Alessandra in Bologna, where she lived. During his visit, he took the time to understand her world without being intrusive. One gesture that stood out was his offer to visit Alessandra's mother at the care home. This thoughtful act left a lasting impression, showing that he cared not only about Alessandra but also about the life she had built and the people she cherished. In the months that followed, Giovanni kept visiting Bologna. He and Alessandra spent peaceful moments together, walking around the city, cooking, and doing errands. He joined her in her daily activities and seemed to appreciate the slower pace of her life. He appeared to genuinely care for her, capturing their moments together in photos he occasionally shared online. In private messages, he expressed his support and affection for her. To onlookers, their relationship might have seemed surprising yet meaningful, as two very different lives came together. Shortly after the new year, the sense of security began to fade. Giovanni's behavior changed. He started calling more frequently, sometimes multiple times a day, and his questions became highly specific. What had once seemed like affectionate curiosity turned into suspicion. He wanted to know who she was talking to, what she was doing, and why. Their conversations morphed into interrogations filled with doubt. Then, he began accusing her of hiding things. There was no basis for his claims. His obsession extended beyond Alessandra. He started calling Stefania directly, trying to persuade her to adopt his distorted perspective. While he initially sought her support, his behavior grew increasingly erratic. His tone shifted from persuasive to aggressive. Stefania remembered how he used to yell during phone calls, his voice loud and full of accusations. Eventually, she cut all contact with him. In contrast, Alessandra chose to stay connected, believing that the difficult times would eventually pass. She tried to avoid arguments and calm the situation down in hopes of restoring balance. However, the man who had once seemed emotionally understanding became more controlling. His jealousy took hold, and even minor social media interactions, likes, photos, comments, sparked new conflicts. He demanded explanations for every little thing. As his obsession grew, so did his need for control. He began calling her at all hours of the night, and his messages shifted from sweet to overwhelming, and often filled with frustration or regret. Alessandra's sense of peace was shattered. His unpredictable moods drained her, and his expectations were unrealistic. Yet, he continued to intrude into her life in increasingly invasive ways. In early 2022, the situation worsened for Alessandra. After one of her visits, she discovered she was locked out of her email and social media accounts. When she tried to recover them, she found that the new passwords contained clues and references linked to Giovanni, making her suspect he had accessed her computer. The more she investigated, the more alarming things became. Her WhatsApp account was connected to a foreign device, and spyware was later found on her phone. This spyware allowed Giovanni not only to monitor her but also to read her messages, check her call logs, track her location in real time. His surveillance was intentional and methodical. Alessandra's suspicions were confirmed when Giovanni started mentioning private conversations she had never disclosed to him. He was aware of who she had communicated with and when. He challenged her with distorted interpretations of her online interactions, convinced she was being unfaithful despite having no evidence. His delusions intensified, and he demanded constant proof of her location, short videos every 10 minutes showing where she was and who she was with. When Alessandra refused to comply, he erupted in anger, threatening to end their relationship, accuse her of betrayal, or overwhelm her with messages until she complied. His demeanor became cold, controlling. Alessandra felt she was no longer an equal partner in the relationship. Instead, she felt watched, judged, and trapped. Giovanni's actions took a terrifying turn when he gained access to Alessandra's home surveillance system. He even sent a screenshot of her inside her apartment to her, revealing he had been watching her in what she thought was a safe space. By mid-2022, Giovanni's behavior became overtly predatory. He not only monitored her online but also started to follow her in person. He loitered around her apartment building in Bologna, appearing at strange hours without any notice. Neighbors began to take notice. One saw him attempting to enter the building, while another spotted him on the roof. He was no longer attempting to conceal his intentions. Her life became dominated by anxiety. Giovanni had become unpredictable and dangerous. The damage began to escalate. Someone tampered with her car, cutting its wiring and disabling the lights. In her apartment, the power was cut when someone removed the fuses. These incidents were more than just vandalism. They were deliberate attempts to force her to confront him. She heard shouting, loud bangs against her walls, and items being smashed in her home. At one point, he even climbed back onto the roof, trying to break in again. What had once seemed like affection had turned into obsession. All personal boundaries had been shattered. Alessandra, who once led a calm, structured life filled with routine, was now living in a constant state of fear. Alessandra was no longer in a relationship. She felt as though she was being hunted. She started carrying pepper spray. This small change marked a significant emotional shift for someone who once felt confident and graceful. Fear began to permeate her daily life. She confided in friends and family that returning home made her anxious. Sometimes, she sought comfort at her sister Stefania's house, but this relief was always temporary, and her dog had to stay in the apartment. Leaving her dog behind was not an option for Alessandra. This emotional connection forced her to return to a dangerous environment repeatedly. Between July and August, the situation grew more volatile. Alessandra shared her experiences of intimidation and increasing aggression with Stefania. Despite her fear, she was still searching for ways to calm the situation. She avoided direct confrontations, perhaps hoping that silence or a calm demeanor would lessen the obsession. However, Giovanni reacted to her distance by becoming even more aggressive, perceiving her withdrawal as a challenge that needed to be addressed. On July 29, 2022, Alessandra took an important step to protect herself by filing a police report. She documented Giovanni's obsessive behavior, his repeated invasions of her privacy, and his increasingly erratic presence near her home. To support her claims, she provided screenshots of messages, photos of him near her residence, and detailed accounts of the stalking that had troubled her for months. Despite this evidence, the police did not take urgent measures. Days went by, and her fear continued. On August 3rd, she returned to the police with more evidence, including additional sightings and further incidents of interference. Although she reiterated her concerns, the case was still considered in its early stages. Investigators acknowledged her claims, but no protective actions were recommended. There was no restraining order, no formal warning issued, and no police presence near her building. By August 8th, she went back to the police again because the harassment had not ceased. Giovanni still showed up near her home and tried to enter the building. She kept meticulous records of each incident, including car damage, power disruptions, and break-in attempts. His messages had also become more aggressive. Yet, the official response to her situation remained unchanged. A fourth visit took place on August 13th. By that time, Alessandra was both exhausted and terrified. She felt she was being watched, followed, and monitored online. Giovanni's control over her life invaded her personal communications and daily activities. She clearly expressed her fear for her life and provided the police with direct quotes from his messages, which contained threats and psychological manipulation. One of her statements was particularly chilling: "I don't want to die." It was not just a plea, it was a stark warning. However, this was insufficient to prompt urgent action from the authorities. They cited procedural limitations, saying that they needed more witness statements. The investigators minimized the threat because there had been no physical attack, treating the case as simple harassment rather than a potential for violence. They failed to recognize the serious situation unfolding before them. Her family would later contest this failure, asserting that the warnings had been clear, consistent, and serious. The progression of events was evident. What started as an obsession with digital activities escalated into physical intimidation. Giovanni's behavior shifted from being reactive to becoming calculated, repetitive, and dangerous. The most significant evidence emerged on August 20th, 2022, just 3 days before the incident. Giovanni made a checklist on his phone, which investigators later discovered in his Notes app. The list was precise, detailing items such as duct tape, a hammer, and restraints. Below the list was a written plan outlining steps to simulate a conversation, find a way to enter, and gather the necessary tools. The thoroughness of this plan eliminated any doubt about his intentions. This was not an act of impulsive anger, it was deliberate planning. On August 21st, Giovanni left Sicily, where he had been involved in football-related activities, and traveled to Senigallia under the pretense of personal business. He continued his journey, arrived in Bologna on August 22nd. Digital records later confirmed Giovanni's movements in unsettling detail. He entered Bologna quietly, without notifying anyone, including Alessandra. After arriving, he concealed a hammer in a bush near Alessandra's apartment building, placing it strategically in a hidden corner of the residential complex. He had thoroughly scouted the area beforehand, meticulously planning each step. That same day, he climbed to the rooftop of the building and watched Alessandra's movements from above. He had been watching her for months, but this time, he was ready to act. Weeks earlier, Giovanni had made a note on his phone, dated July 2nd, stating, "He will end her because she ended him emotionally." In the note, he portrayed himself as a victim, claiming he had been manipulated and abandoned, pushing him to his breaking point. He was fully aware of the consequences of his actions, writing, "He know he will end up in prison. This note will explain to the police what she did to him." His intentions were clear. He had made this decision long before he traveled north. On the evening of August 23rd, Alessandra arrived home, unaware that Giovanni was waiting nearby. It was just after 9 p.m., and she was on the phone with her sister, Stefania, in a normal conversation built. As Alessandra approached the entrance of the building, Giovanni emerged from his hiding place. The attack happened in seconds. Stefania, still on the phone, noticed a sudden change. Alessandra's voice shifted, followed by the unmistakable sounds of a violent struggle. In that brief moment, everything fell apart. Witnesses later reported seeing Giovanni attack her. He grabbed a hammer and struck her with such force that the hammerhead broke off the handle. However, he didn't stop there. Giovanni continued to hit her with his fists and then picked up a heavy wrought iron bench from just outside the entrance, using it to beat her repeatedly. He displayed extreme violence, delivering multiple devastating blows. Forensic reports later indicated that she had suffered over 20 traumatic injuries. Alessandra had visible injuries on her skull, chest, arms, and legs, showing evidence of a brutal assault. Her body was found with signs of blunt force trauma, severe fractures, and indications that she had been dragged on the ground. Despite the loud noises and chaos, Giovanni made no attempt to flee. When the police arrived, he was calmly sitting by the front door of the building, waiting. Officers noted his eerie composure. There was no struggle or remorse, only a chilling acceptance of his actions. Alessandra was taken to the hospital, but unfortunately, it was too late. Her injuries were severe, and she died shortly after arriving. The evidence was indisputable. His actions were deliberate, and he made no attempt to hide what he had done. The precision in his timing and the weapon's location revealed clear premeditation. Witnesses described him as quick and confident, as if he had rehearsed the act numerous times in his mind. Stefania's phone call, along with both physical and digital evidence, was essential for piecing together the timeline of events. The entire attack lasted just a few minutes, but it followed months of carefully planned psychological abuse. After his arrest, Giovanni was moved to a psychiatric facility. Initially, he chose to remain silent but later made statements blaming Alessandra for what happened, claiming she caused him emotional pain and had broken him. Investigators, however, recognized this as an attempt to mislead. The crime was clearly planned, documented, and carried out with disturbing precision. Although his defense team requested a psychiatric evaluation, court-appointed experts determined that he was fully aware of his actions. He showed obsessive and controlling behavior but did not qualify for an insanity defense. His mental state was intact, and he acted with intent. During sentencing, Giovanni spoke briefly, describing his experience as a nightmare. He told the court that if they considered him sane, he deserved the maximum penalty. He attempted to portray himself as a broken man, but the court was unaffected by his claims. His attempt to blame his victim fell apart under the weight of the evidence. On February 12, 2024, Giovanni Padovani was found guilty of stalking and the premeditated murder of Alessandra Mattuzzi. He was sentenced to life in prison. The court highlighted several aggravating factors: the cruelty of the attack, his lack of remorse, and the extensive psychological abuse that occurred before the crime. The consequences extended beyond the courtroom. Following Alessandra's death, a surge of online hostility targeted her on social media. Mean comments overwhelmed news articles, with strangers criticizing her looks, clothing, and age, as well as the age difference between her and Giovanni. Some even implied that she had provoked his actions. One of the most alarming remarks came from Donatello Alberti, was then director of Croce Bianca of Ferrara, who suggested that her appearance justified Giovanni's jealousy. The backlash was swift, resulting in Alberti's immediate removal from his position. Alessandra's family responded by filing complaints against 5 individuals for their online harassment. In an unusual move, the Bologna prosecutor's office initiated an investigation into this cyber harassment. This case set a significant legal precedent in Italy, marking one of the first times digital defamation against a deceased victim was prosecuted on such a scale. In the view of both the court and the public, Giovanni's actions were not only murder but also the final result of a prolonged campaign of control, psychological, digital, and physical, a heartbreaking example of a system that failed to intervene in time. Experts later recognized his behavior as classic Othello syndrome, a psychological condition characterized by delusional jealousy. Unlike normal jealousy, this disorder involves persistent, irrational thoughts and doubts about a partner's fidelity, along with an inability to accept reality. In severe cases, it can lead to violence, as was the tragic outcome for Alessandra, who lost her life due to this condition. Alessandra Mattuzzi's life, defined by compassion and grace, was cruelly ended on August 23, 2022, by Giovanni Padovani's calculated violence, despite her desperate pleas for protection. While his life sentence on February 12, 2024, delivered justice, it could not erase the pain of her family, particularly her sister Stefania, nor the sting of a system that failed to act on her warnings. Alessandra's legacy as a devoted daughter, sister, and professional endures, her warmth forever etched in the hearts of those she loved. Her family's fight against post-murder cyber harassment, culminating in a groundbreaking Italian legal precedent, has sparked vital conversations about digital abuse and victim blaming. Though her loss remains a stark reminder of unchecked stalking and domestic violence, Alessandra's memory fuels a call for stronger protections to ensure no one else suffers her fate. Just after sunrise, a morning exerciser happened to witness a horrifying scene. A young woman was lying lifeless near the edge of a quiet neighborhood in Chapel Hill. There were no clues about what had happened, no sounds, no witnesses, just an eerie silence. Who was she? How did she end up there? And why did her life end so abruptly? As the police started to investigate, they uncovered a tragic story that would impact two cities profoundly. Eve Carson was born on November 19, 1985, in Athens, Georgia. She was raised in a loving home by her parents, Teresa and Bob Carson. She grew up with her brother Andrew in Athens, where her exceptional qualities began to emerge. From an early age, Eve distinguished herself academically and socially. At Clark Central High School, her remarkable intelligence and charm led her to become the valedictorian and the student body president, winning 55% of the student vote. These early achievements hint at the bright future she is on her way to creating. Eve's warmth, intellect, and leadership grew even stronger when she began her studies at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill in 2004. Despite receiving offers from prestigious universities like Princeton and Yale, along with scholarships, Eve opted to attend a public university. She believed in the importance of education and obtained a significant scholarship while pursuing a double major in political science and biology. Her goal was to build a career in the medical field. Outside of her studies, Eve engaged deeply in service and leadership. She led multiple student organizations, completed a challenging 4-year leadership program, and participated in outreach initiatives like Girls on the Run. Additionally, she spent time tutoring children in local schools and worked in underprivileged communities abroad through the Moorhead Cane Summer Enrichment Program. Her volunteer experiences took her to Ecuador, Egypt, and Ghana, where she served in various roles, including medical assistant and community educator. Eve was not just a student leader, she was a beloved figure in her community. Friends admired her, faculty respected her. Her lively spirit made a positive impact wherever she went. However, in March 2008, everything changed. Eve was last seen at home around 1:30 a.m. after deciding to stay in and study while her housemates went out. Sometime between that moment and early morning, she faced an unimaginable tragedy. By 5 a.m., she was missing. Later that morning, authorities found her car at the intersection of North Street and Hillsborough Street in Chapel Hill, following the tip. Tragically, her body was found just a mile from her home. She had been shot and left. Investigators were initially confused by the case. The motive was unclear, and the incident seemed random. With no immediate suspects, law enforcement began examining phone and bank records for clues. A key piece of evidence in the investigation emerged when Eve's abandoned SUV was discovered. Authorities believe Eve Carson was shot multiple times around 5:30 a.m. on a Wednesday morning, with one bullet striking her close range in the right temple. To advance the investigation, Chapel Hill police announced a $25,000 reward for any information that could lead to her killer's arrest. Forensic specialists found that the last activity on Eve's computer occurred at 3:37 a.m., which helped narrow down the time frame in which she might have been abducted. Just 21 minutes later, at 3:55 a.m., her debit card was used at an ATM in University Mall, Chapel Hill. The ATM recorded several transactions, including one that successfully withdrew the maximum daily limit of $700, while 5 additional attempts failed. Fortunately, the ATM surveillance system captured grainy images of the person using the card. The footage showed a young male wearing a black hoodie and cap, and in one frame, there seemed to be a second figure in the back seat of the car, possibly Eve, although the image was too unclear to confirm. At 4:44 a.m., another attempt was made to withdraw money, but no cameras captured the event. Less than 30 minutes later, Eve was shot and killed. However, her debit card was used again that day at 12:39 p.m., with 2 transactions made at a mini-mart on Moorhead Avenue in Durham. Over the next 2 days, several more suspicious transactions occurred, leading to a crucial piece of evidence. On March 7th, at 12:54 a.m., another surveillance camera captured another man attempting to use Eve's card. This individual was clearly not the same as the person filmed at the University Mall ATM, making him a second key suspect. The failed transaction and the clear video footage became pivotal moments in the investigation. As police worked to identify the individuals involved, the communities of Chapel Hill and Athens came together in grief. Eve Carson was buried on March 9, 2008, and her funeral was attended by hundreds of people. At the University of North Carolina, thousands paid their respects with a moment of silence. Initially, the investigation progressed slowly, despite having several images of the suspects. However, on March 12, just 1 week after Eve's murder, authorities received a promising tip. They identified a man who resembled a suspect from the surveillance video as 21-year-old Demario James Atwater. Atwater had a troubled past, with 2 prior felony convictions, making him familiar with the criminal justice system. He had violated parole and committed additional offenses while under supervision, and he was due to appear in court just 2 days before Eve's murder. His criminal record included charges for assault, robbery, trespassing, and banned substance possession with intent to distribute. He had also been caught with a firearm while on probation, but due to an administrative mistake, his court hearing was postponed past the date of Eve's death. Additionally, Atwater's home on Rosedale Avenue in Durham was located close to the crime scene. The investigation picked up momentum when detectives linked Atwater to Lawrence Alvin Lovett Jr., 17, a young man who closely resembled the person seen on the University Mall ATM footage. Both were school dropouts from Durham and had attended the same school, making their connection concerning. Atwater and Lovett became the main suspects in a case that shocked 2 communities and left a significant void for those who knew and respected Eve Carson. On the morning of March 12, 2008, authorities took action. After gathering substantial evidence and appealing to the public for information, police arrested 21-year-old Demario in Durham, charging him with the first-degree murder of Eve Carson. The case was developing quickly. Chapel Hill's mayor acknowledged the progress made but reminded the public of the profound grief that enveloped the town. A cherished student was lost, and the community was still struggling to cope with her absence. Lovett was eventually found and charged alongside Atwater. Although he was a minor, Lovett had a prior criminal record that included probation for theft and breaking and entering. Both he and Atwater was clear video evidence connecting them to ATM transactions made with Eve's card. The investigation reached a crucial stage in late March when a grand jury indicted both men on multiple serious charges, including first-degree murder, first-degree kidnapping, armed robbery, possession of a firearm by a felon, felony larceny, and possession of stolen property. Lovett faced additional legal issues as he was also charged in connection with the earlier murder of 29-year-old Abhijit Mahato, a Duke University graduate student from India. Mahato had been kidnapped from his home on January 18, 2008, just weeks before Eve's death. He was forced to withdraw cash from an ATM and was later shot while returning home. There were many similarities between this case and Eve's, but the evidence linking Lovett to Mahato's murder was not strong enough, leading to his acquittal. Abhijit Mahato's murder remains unsolved to this day. The legal proceedings in Eve Carson's case have started in earnest. Prosecutors decided to try Atwater and Lovett separately. Atwater, being an adult, faced the possibility of the death penalty, while Lovett, due to his age at the time of the crime, could not receive that sentence. The prosecution began to piece together a disturbing account of events that took place in the early hours of March 5, 2008, a crime driven by greed and chance. Around 1:30 a.m., Eve remained at home to study while her roommates went out. Atwater and Lovett then saw Carson walking toward her car. They stormed into Carson's car with Lovett in the driver's seat and Atwater in the back seat. They forced she into the back seat, where Atwater held her hostage at gunpoint. Investigators concluded that the two were looking for an easy target. Both had been released on bond, were low on money, and had no prior connection to Eve. She was just a stranger they happened to encounter. This marked the start of a tragic series of events that would lead to a brutal and senseless murder. Digital records show that Eve Carson's computer was last active at 3:37 a.m. on March 5, 2008. Shortly after, her life took a tragic turn when she was kidnapped by Atwater and Lovett. They put her in the back seat of her own SUV and drove to several ATMs to withdraw cash. Surveillance cameras captured them at an ATM. Their second attempt at 4:44 a.m. at mall failed because they had already reached Eve's daily withdrawal limit. Lovett told a friend that throughout the ordeal, Carson tried to reason with her captors, telling them that they did not have to do what they were doing. She also begged for her life, telling them that they could take whatever they wanted and that they did not have to kill her. However, Lovett and Atwater decided to kill Carson because she had seen their faces. They took her to a wooded area about a mile from UNC to commit the murder. Carson had been shot 5 times. She was first attacked in the right shoulder, right upper arm, right buttock, right cheek with a .25 caliber pistol. Blood found in Carson's lungs during an autopsy showed that she was still alive and breathing after being attacked with the pistol. The 5th and fatal shot she received was from a sawed-off 12-gauge shotgun. It went through her right hand, suggesting she was trying to shield herself, into her right temple and brain. According to a forensic psychologist and crime analyst, the way Carson was shot showed a complete lack of respect for others. After his arrest, Demario James Atwater confessed to his involvement in the crime. He confirmed that he was captured on the ATM footage and identified Lovett as his accomplice. To avoid going to trial, Atwater pleaded guilty to all federal charges and directly apologized to Eve's parents during sentencing. On September 23, 2010, he was sentenced to life in prison plus 30 years, thus escaping the death penalty. In contrast, Lovett decided to fight the charges against him. He pleaded not guilty to various state offenses, including first-degree murder, kidnapping, armed robbery, larceny, and possession of stolen property. His trial began in December 2011. After 2 weeks, the jury found him guilty on all counts, and he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Complications arose soon after. In 2013, the North Carolina Court of Appeals overturned Lovett's sentence, referencing a U.S. Supreme Court decision that deemed mandatory life sentences for juveniles unconstitutional. Lovett was 17 years old at the time of Eve's murder, which prompted a new sentencing hearing. During this hearing, Lovett spoke to the court, expressing remorse for his actions and acknowledging the pain he had caused. He argued that he was not the monster he was portrayed to be. However, the court upheld its previous decision, sentencing him once more to life in prison without the possibility of parole, a decision many felt was justified due to the severity of the crime. Since being incarcerated, Lovett has received several disciplinary infractions, indicating limited progress in his rehabilitation. Despite being a minor at the time of the murder, he has continued to display violent and disruptive behavior while in prison. There were further ripples tied to this case. Months after Diario's arrest, his stepbrother Shelton was fatally shot while leaving a party. Unlike Diario, Shelton was not involved in criminal activity, and his death devastated their family, particularly their mother, who, in less than a year, lost both sons in different tragedies. Eve's murder also cast a harsh light on failings within the criminal justice system. At the time of her death, both Lovett and Atwater were on probation and had repeatedly violated the terms of their release. Probation officers failed to respond effectively, even after discovering that Atwater had breached conditions multiple times. In February 2008, an arrest warrant was finally issued for Atwater, and he was taken into custody, but he posted a $10,000 bond and was released just days before Eve's murder. His court date had been scheduled for March 3rd, but was delayed due to administrative errors. 2 days later, Eve was dead. Authorities believe that the desire to recover his lost bond money was a key motivation for Atwater's involvement in the robbery. It is deeply frustrating that a series of bureaucratic failures allowed two dangerous individuals to remain free. The consequences were irreversible. Eve Carson was more than a victim. She was an exceptional young woman whose light touched countless lives. Intelligent, joyful, and driven, she dedicated herself to public service, education, and global outreach. Her legacy of compassion and leadership lives on. In her honor, the University of North Carolina established the Eve Carson Scholarship. The award, designed by students and approved posthumously, reflects Eve's own vision for helping others achieve their potential. It is granted annually to two juniors who demonstrate the same commitment to service, leadership, and academic excellence. Eve was considering graduate studies in science policy. Her future was bright, but that story was stolen. For all her achievements, it is the character of Eve Carson that continues to resonate. In her final moments, she chose to respond to hatred with compassion, asking her killers to pray. Even in fear, she embodied grace. Though her life was ended for less than $1,500, her impact was and remains immeasurable. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. The murder of Eve Carson in March 2008 was more than a singular act of violence. It was a seismic event that shattered the tranquility of Chapel Hill and Athens, exposing the fragility of life and the consequences of systemic shortcomings. Eve, a young woman of boundless potential, embodied the best of humanity: intelligence, compassion, and an unwavering commitment to making the world better. Her senseless death, driven by greed and indifference, left communities grappling with grief and questions that linger to this day. Yet, from this tragedy emerged a powerful testament to her character and influence. The investigation and prosecution of her killers, Demario James Atwater and Lawrence Alvin Lovett Jr., brought a measure of justice, but it also laid bare the failures of a criminal justice system that allowed two individuals with troubled histories to remain free. The bureaucratic oversights that enabled their actions underscore the need for vigilance, reform, and accountability. Eve's death became a catalyst for change, prompting North Carolina to overhaul its probation system and sparking broader conversations about safety and prevention. Her loss was a clarion call to address the cracks in the systems meant to protect us, ensuring that such tragedies are not repeated. Eve Carson's legacy is a challenge to us all: to live purposefully, to serve selflessly, and to confront injustice with resolve. Her life, though tragically brief, was a masterpiece of impact, and her memory continues to shape a better future. Ana Nezovich, a U.S. citizen, had moved to Madrid after 13 years of marriage to take some time for herself and start anew. While in Madrid, she was involved in finalizing her divorce, making future plans, and keeping in touch with her family and friends. On February 2nd, Ana made her last known phone call. The very next day, messages began arriving from her phone, raising immediate concerns. One of her close friends quickly noticed that the texts did not sound like Ana. Ana was born in 1983 in Colombia to a family that valued traditional Balkan customs. Her upbringing emphasized the importance of family, discipline, and education. Growing up, she was known for her neatness, organizational abilities, and independence, traits that remained with her throughout her life. Later, Ana moved to the United States, became a U.S. citizen. Living in here opened up new career and personal growth opportunities for her. She became fluent in English, honed her professional skills, gradually became a part of her local community. Ana always prioritized education, self-improvement. She choosing to live a quiet and unassuming life away from the public eye. In the early 2000s, Ana met David Nezovich in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Their relationship progressed quickly. They then moved in together and got married. As their personal relationship grew, they became business partners as well, founding a company focused on tech support and IT solutions. David took care of the technical aspects of the business, while Anna managed organization and long-term strategy. Eventually, they began investing in real estate, acquiring properties throughout Florida. From the outside, their life together seemed stable. They had a thriving business, a home, and a comfortable lifestyle, giving the impression of a couple on the path to financial independence. However, underlying issues were developing. Friends and acquaintances were largely unaware of the growing problems in their marriage. Over time, serious conflicts arose, including financial disagreements and deeper personal issues. By 2023, Anna and David's marriage had deteriorated to a breaking point. Those close to them reported they were in the midst of a separation, with asset division becoming the main focus. This included both their tech business and several real estate properties. Although they had not yet finalized the divorce, both were already preparing for it. Negotiations had started, disagreements emerged, and tensions were rising. With the conflict escalating, Anna chose to temporarily leave the U.S. In December 2023, she moved to Madrid, renting an apartment in the upscale Salamanca neighborhood. She explained that this move was essential for distancing herself from the stress, gaining clarity, and closing a chapter in her life. She repeatedly stated that she wasn't seeking a new relationship or distractions. Her goal was simply to regain her balance. After settling in Spain, Anna made her new place feel like home, began therapy, maintained close contact with friends, and started planning short trips across Europe. Her time in Madrid wasn't an escape, it was a way to step back from the overwhelming conflict she faced in Florida. However, just a few weeks into this new life, an unexpected event brought her independent journey to a sudden and troubling end. After moving to Madrid, Anna maintained a close friendship with her longtime friend, Sana Remo, who was living in Florida. They talked every day, despite the time difference. Their friendship had a strong foundation, and they often traveled together. Anna trusted Sana completely, often sharing her thoughts, feelings, and daily experiences with her. Their text messages showed that Anna was open about her adjustment to life in Spain. In mid-January 2024, the two friends traveled to Austria together. After their trip, they made plans to meet again in Madrid, with Sana set to arrive on February 8th. Before that, Anna had arranged a short trip to Barcelona with another friend on February 5th. They had already booked their tickets for the trip, which was not just a vacation but also included attending a conference. Anna had discussed their plans and was excited about the upcoming journey. On the evening of February 2nd, Anna had a phone call with Sana around 8:30 p.m. local time. They spoke for over an hour. Anna mentioned that she planned to stay in that night and had no plans to go out. She appeared calm and talked about her day, sharing details about errands and household chores. Their conversation ended around 10 p.m., which is the last confirmed time anyone had contact with Anna. The next morning, February 3rd, Sana received a text from Anna's number. It said, "I met an amazing man. He has a summer house about 2 hours from Madrid. We're heading there. The signal might be weak. I'll call you when I return." Soon after, another message arrived. "After my therapy session yesterday, I took a walk. He approached me on the street, and we instantly connected. I've never felt like this before." Sana felt something was off about the messages. She knew Anna well. She was cautious and would never leave town with a stranger without informing someone. Sana responded immediately, but there were no further replies. Her calls also went unanswered. At first, she tried to convince herself that Anna might indeed be in a place with poor reception. However, her concern quickly escalated into alarm. That same day, another friend of Anna's received similar messages. The text felt strange. The wording was flat and lacked Anna's usual style. What struck her as odd was the dialect, which sounded very different from Anna's typical speech. They mentioned that the text seemed like it had been translated from another language using an automatic translator. The theory was logical. The message sounded awkward and overly formal, which made him uncomfortable. Both Sana and Anna's friend quickly figured out that Anna hadn't written those messages herself. They compared them to their previous conversations and immediately noticed the difference. Anna's actual texts were vibrant and filled with her distinctive expressions, none of which were present in these messages. Furthermore, the content of the messages didn't match her recent actions at all. The next day, Sana did everything she could to contact Anna. She reached out to their mutual friends, tried tracking her location using apps, and even called local hospitals. However, nothing worked. Although Anna's phone was on, she did not answer. After, Sana quickly contacted the Madrid police. She explained that Anna's sudden silence was very unusual and that the messages had a tone that Anna wouldn't normally use. However, the authorities did not act right away. They viewed Anna as an adult who had the right to make her own choices, including leaving town without notifying anyone. Officially, her disappearance was not deemed suspicious. Police stated they could not start an investigation without evidence that Anna was missing against her will. They believed the unusual texts and her lack of communication were insufficient. The only definitive point they recognized was February 5th, the day Anna was supposed to travel to Barcelona. Authorities indicated that if she did not arrive at the station or reach out by that date, her absence would be considered a formal missing persons case. As a result, no significant actions were taken for 3 days after Anna stopped responding. The police did not check her phone records, search her apartment, or look into her recent activities. After Anna went missing, her friends tried hard to find her. They called and texted her repeatedly and even contacted people in Madrid, but nothing worked. On February 5th, Anna was supposed to be at the train station but didn't show up, and none of her phones were answering. It was only then that authorities officially declared her a missing person. That same day, a request was made to the court for permission to search her apartment and access her phone records. However, the request was denied by a judge due to a lack of evidence suggesting any crime had occurred. There were no signs of forced entry, loud noises, or aggressive behavior. Therefore, there was no legal basis for allowing a search or accessing her private information. Days later, when law enforcement entered Anna's apartment, they found that the door was locked from the outside. Inside, everything looked untouched. Her belongings were in order, there were no signs of a struggle, and nothing valuable was missing. However, the fact that her home was undisturbed raised serious concerns about her disappearance. It indicated that she might have either left voluntarily and never returned or that someone took her out without breaking in. Anna's brother, Felipe Anal, kept in close contact with Spanish authorities but pointed out that coordinating internationally was difficult. He shared with reporters that the investigators in Madrid had limited English proficiency and that U.S. officials had not yet provided significant assistance. He expressed worry about the lack of communication among Spanish police, the FBI, and the U.S. consulate. Despite the disappearance of a U.S. citizen under mysterious circumstances abroad, the initial days following Anna's vanishing were poorly managed. This was a critical time when they could have gathered fresh evidence, interviewed neighbors, and reviewed phone activity or camera footage. Instead, valuable time was wasted, assuming Anna left on her own. This assumption delayed a prompt response and may have impacted the investigation's course. On the 4 days later after Anna Nezovic disappeared, staff at her apartment complex provided police with crucial information that changed the investigation. This information was about the night of February 2nd, which was the last time Anna had been in contact. A building administrator reported that several surveillance cameras at the entrance and along the building's facade had been disabled around 9:30 p.m., just 30 minutes before Anna stopped responding to her friend. When security personnel reviewed the recordings, they noticed that the camera lenses had been intentionally covered. The footage showed a person in dark clothing and a motorcycle helmet approaching the outdoor cameras. He spraying paint directly onto the lenses to obscure them. Afterward, he waited for someone to exit the building, which allowed him to slip inside. Once inside, he targeted the camera in the elevator area, spraying paint over its lens as well. This act appeared to be deliberate. The individual seemed to know where the surveillance devices were and how to disable them quickly, discreetly. The building staff confirmed that the security systems had been tampered with. They provided copies of the footage to Spanish investigators, which was the first visual evidence indicating possible outside interference. However, identifying the person in the video was impossible due to his helmet and dark clothing. The individual's face was completely covered, and their body type did not offer enough clues for clear identification. Nevertheless, forensic experts noted a few important details. The person's eyes, part of their forehead, and brow line were briefly visible. Investigators believe that this person planned the act meticulously. He brought spray paint and wore equipment intended to prevent leaving any traces behind. His appearance in the footage matched the timeline of Anna's disappearance, raising further suspicions. The targeting of the building's surveillance system and the disabling of specific cameras indicated that the individual was familiar with the layout of the premises, suggesting this was not a random act. It was planned and concerning. Further investigation showed that the exterior camera was spray painted in about 30 seconds, and the interior camera was disabled even more quickly. Every action taken was intentional and confident, with no sign of hesitation or looking around. This led investigators to conclude that the individual knew how long the actions would take and executed them with precision. A staff member confirmed that this man appeared on camera just as residents were leaving. He seized the opportunity to enter the building, indicating that he did not have authorized access. Without a key card or entry code, he was not recognized as a resident. He took a direct route from the entrance to the camera near the elevator, with no stops. The video footage quickly caught the attention of both law enforcement and Anna's friends. Sana, who had reached Madrid by that time, shared the video with journalists, which sparked public interest in the case. Media outlets began to speculate that the man in the helmet might be linked to Anna's disappearance, but his identity and motives remained unknown. After an image from the surveillance footage was made public, the FBI started its own analysis. They noted that even low-resolution footage could be analyzed to compare visual elements with their databases. They concentrated on key facial features that were still visible despite the helmet, such as the shape of the eyes, the space between the eyebrows, the brow ridges, and the upper facial structure. These aspects can often be recognized even when partially hidden. Public curiosity about the footage intensified when it was revealed that the paint used to disable the cameras was from a specific brand, which later appeared in other parts of the investigation. Investigators did not release this detail right away, but they found that the spray can involve match the type and packaging shown in a store surveillance footage. This footage captured a man who looked similar to someone seen at Anna's building buying the same spray can. After Anna stopped answering calls and messages, her friend Sana reached out to her husband, David Nezovich, on February 4th. During their conversation, Sana learned that David was in Florida. She proposed that they travel to Madrid together to help search for Anna, and David agreed, even discussing a specific flight from Miami for the next day. However, when the time arrived, he did not show up and later claimed to be in Serbia. This unexpected turn left Anna's friends confused. David was aware that his wife had gone missing under mysterious circumstances in a foreign country. He had the ability to fly to Spain, yet he chose to go to Serbia instead. This decision was puzzling. Instead of participating in the search, he went to a third country where his relatives live. Questions naturally arose. Why didn't he go to the location where his wife disappeared? Why didn't he join the search effort? Sana grew increasingly concerned about David's behavior. While he did not openly dismiss her, his reactions felt distant and confusing. His actions seemed illogical. Although the first few days were critical, he did not attempt to go to Madrid. He believed there was nothing he could do in Spain because he did not speak Spanish, had no place to stay, and was unfamiliar with the city. His lawyer supported this view, explaining to reporters that going to a country without any local connections would not be useful. He also mentioned that David was worried about Anna's disappearance but felt that being there in person would not make a difference. After Anna went missing, David hired a lawyer in Florida. The lawyer reported that David had been in contact with the FBI and had shared all necessary information, including credit card statements and his efforts to find legal assistance in Spain. However, none of these actions involved him participating in the search directly. Despite providing some information, David stayed distant and avoided making any public comments. After Florida police confirmed that David reported a theft in January, several questions emerged. He alleged that $5,000 in cash and personal items were stolen from his unlocked car. In the morning, he found the passenger door slightly open. Security cameras near his home did not capture the theft, and the police could not identify any suspects. Although there was no initial connection to Anna's case, the report became suspicious in light of subsequent events. David's trip to Serbia created further controversy. He asserted that he left the U.S. before Anna's disappearance and remained abroad during that time. However, Saw mentioned a phone call with him on February 4th, in which he stated he was in Florida, suggesting he might have flown to Serbia after that conversation. There was no official confirmation from border control authorities at that time. David's attorney provided his passport as evidence that he had left earlier, but these inconsistencies raised doubts and increased suspicion regarding his involvement. The situation became more complicated due to a property dispute that had intensified months before Anna disappeared. With shared assets about to be divided, suspicion was understandable. This divorce was not just ordinary, it involved significant financial stakes and joint possessions. Anna's friends noted that their relationship had turned hostile. In contrast, David and his lawyer claimed the divorce was amicable, arguing that they had simply grown apart. At that time, David had not been charged with any crime and was located outside the U.S. However, his absence during the search for Anna and inconsistencies in his statements raised concerns among investigators. While David insisted he had no involvement in Anna's disappearance, a growing list of circumstantial evidence caught the attention of both police and the FBI. In May 2024, U.S. authorities arrested David at Miami International Airport, just after he arrived on an international flight. He was taken into custody by the Diplomatic Security Service and the FBI without any issues. This was the first official action that connected him to Anna's disappearance. He faced charges related to the abduction of a U.S. citizen outside the country, based on a series of indirect but related pieces of evidence uncovered during a multinational investigation. One of the key pieces of evidence was surveillance footage collected by investigators in Spain and Serbia. At a store close to Anna's apartment in Madrid, cameras captured a man who looked like David buying a can of spray paint and duct tape. Forensic analysis showed that the spray paint was the same brand used to disable the security cameras in Anna's building, as the label and color were identical. Investigators viewed this as evidence of premeditation. Additionally, authorities tracked a rental car used by David in Serbia. GPS data indicated that the car entered Spain, traveled through Madrid, and then moved into northern Italy before returning to Serbia. The precise tracking of this route led investigators to believe that Anna's body may have been transported in that vehicle. A stop in a wooded area of northern Italy raised particular interest, prompting coordinated searches by both Italian and Spanish law enforcement. As of that time, no remains had been discovered, but the theory that Anna's body was transported remained a central focus of the investigation. A key piece of evidence came from surveillance footage in Anna's apartment building. Investigators released a video showing a man, matching David's physical description, exiting the elevator with a large suitcase on the same night Anna disappeared. Though his face was obscured, the timing and situation aligned with other findings in the investigation. Authorities suspected that the suitcase might have been used to remove Anna's body from the apartment. David's rental car, which he had picked up in Serbia, was eventually returned to the rental agency. An inspection revealed that the car's mileage had increased by over 4,800 miles. Additionally, it had been modified with tinted windows, which were not part of the original rental terms. These changes raised suspicions. Investigators also found that the car was operating with false license plates during a time it was believed to have been used for cross-border travel. Spanish police recorded a sighting of a similar vehicle near the location where Anna disappeared, but they could not identify the driver because of the tinted windows and fake plates. The FBI linked several crucial pieces of evidence: the purchase of materials, disruptions to surveillance systems, the travel route, elevator footage showing a suitcase, and modifications to a car. Their report indicated that all the evidence suggested a planned criminal act and an effort to conceal it. The official statement referred to the case as the abduction of a U.S. citizen abroad, involving a U.S. national. Although no body was found, authorities believed the evidence was strong enough to justify an arrest. David was taken to a federal detention center in South Florida. His lawyers claimed he had cooperated with authorities, willingly shared information, and did not plan to escape. However, prosecutors contended that the substantial circumstantial evidence and the case's context created a significant risk that he might flee. David's arrest was a pivotal moment in the investigation. Until then, he had evaded authorities and avoided speaking publicly. Now, he was the focus of a federal case. The next step was to decide if he would remain in custody until the trial. After his arrest in Miami, David's first court appearance centered on his request for bail. The judge denied the request, citing a high risk of flight, and noted that the actions surrounding Anna's disappearance seemed well planned and executed. The judge highlighted the planning and sophistication as reasons for keeping David in detention. David's legal team appealed the decision, arguing that he posed no danger and did not intend to flee. They proposed a substantial bail amount, an ankle monitor, a travel ban, and home confinement. The defense emphasized David's long-term residence in the U.S., his clean record, and his willingness to cooperate with authorities. However, the court stood. The defense's main argument was that David could not have been in Spain when Anna disappeared. His lawyer presented passport stamps and travel records to show he arrived in Serbia well before February 2nd, claiming that David physically could not have been in Madrid at the time of the incident. The lawyer also noted that David did not speak Spanish, had no ties or residence in Spain, which would have made it difficult for him to plan such an act. Prosecutors were firmly opposed to the defense's claims. They pointed out that David's travels across Europe closely matched the timeline of Anna's disappearance. The evidence included the rental car's route, purchases of specific items, and other activities that suggested he had premeditated the act. Although there was no direct evidence, the prosecution insisted that the strong circumstantial evidence pointed to his involvement. To bolster their case, they presented the court with message transcripts, surveillance footage, phone records, and an analysis of David's behavior. It was argued that some of David's actions could not be mere coincidences. The judge acknowledged that the prosecution had built a substantial body of circumstantial evidence that created a convincing narrative. Although Anna's body had not been found, the evidence indicated that her disappearance involved aggressive intent and likely implicated David specifically. The judge addressed the defense's claim that the evidence was inadequate by clarifying that the requirement for bail is not beyond a reasonable doubt, but preponderance of the evidence. This means the court does not need absolute proof of guilt, only a significant likelihood of risk, like the chance of fleeing or obstructing the investigation. Therefore, the court chose to keep David in custody. His legal team announced they would appeal the bail denial and have filed a formal complaint with the district court, which can review the decisions of lower courts. As the main trial was approaching, David stayed in federal custody. The trial was expected to be lengthy, including expert testimony and international collaboration, and was likely to receive significant media coverage. Investigators began focusing on a woman, identified by the FBI, who might have helped create the suspicious text messages that seemed to come from Anna on February 3rd. This woman, fluent in Spanish, had previously interacted with David via a dating app. The texts sent from Anna's phone were in Spanish and did not match her usual writing style. As mentioned earlier, her close friends quickly noticed that the phrasing resembled a machine translation, a viewpoint later confirmed by linguistic forensic analysis. The defense maintained that there was no direct evidence linking David to the crime. His attorneys highlighted that no one had seen him at Anna's apartment, and there was no evidence of contact between them on the day she went missing. They also questioned the reliability of surveillance footage that showed a man with a suitcase, arguing that it could depict someone else, as the resemblance was not conclusive. Additionally, they emphasized that there had been no official confirmation of Anna's death through forensic evidence. On April 28, 2025, it was reported that David Nezovich, who had been charged with the abduction and presumed death of his wife, Anna, was found dead in his cell at a federal detention center in Miami. His attorneys stated that he took his own life, and no suicide note was discovered. At the time of his death, he had been held without bail while awaiting trial. Anna's family expressed deep sadness and frustration over the situation. Since the trial did not take place, Anna's whereabouts remain unknown. Her loved ones believe that David took the answers about what really happened on the night she disappeared with him. Just after 11 p.m., everything changed. In a small New York City apartment, a loud crashing sound interrupted the quiet. What followed was chaotic and frightening, with neighbors hearing shouting, banging, and objects falling. Then, abruptly, there was silence. Inside the apartment, a young woman found herself in a nightmare she had long dreaded. An ex-lover had returned, and this time he was determined to cause trouble. In 2015, Elena Hardy, nursing student at Hunter College, moved to New York City. Her charming personality made her popular. She quickly made friends in the city. As she focused on her studies and enjoyed the lively atmosphere around her, her promising journey took a troubling turn when she met Fernando Munera. What started as an exciting romance soon turned dangerous. While friends and neighbors often saw them happily walking their dog or riding his motorcycle together, beneath their smiles lay a relationship marked by instability. As time went on, Fernando's behavior became more unpredictable and aggressive. By early 2021, less than a year into their relationship, things escalated to violence. In a terrifying incident, he restrained Elena in her apartment, damaged her possessions, and took her phone to stop her from calling for help. This led to his arrest, where he faced charges of harassment, unlawful imprisonment, and criminal mischief. A restraining order was issued, preventing him from contacting Elena, but he ignored it. Afterward, he began a pattern of constant harassment, bombarding her with calls, dozens in just one weekend. He criticized her appearance and attempted to control how she dressed, even when she was away from home. His obsession grew stronger, and he became increasingly possessive, unable to accept her independence. Neighbors became concerned, noticing his erratic behavior as he muttered to himself and angrily paced in front of the building. On May 19, 2021, tensions escalated dramatically. That evening, Fernando was seen outside, filled with anger, his fists clenched and pacing anxiously. Earlier that day, he had argued with Elena, who refused to let him enter her apartment. He disappeared for several hours, leading many to believe that the situation had calmed down. However, Fernando was actually planning something horrific. Later that night, around 8:45 p.m., chaos erupted. Fernando quickly returned to the building with a knife and a handgun, climbed the fire escape to Hardy's fourth-floor apartment, and broke in through an open window. Inside, Elena barely had time to react. Startled by the sudden crash, she found herself face to face with her ex before she could think or scream. There was nowhere to escape. Within moments, the small apartment turned into a scene of violence. Fernando, consumed by rage, acted on his obsession. He stabbed Elena 7 times, causing cuts and bites, targeting her upper body with calculated brutality. The apartment was filled with the sounds of struggle, Elena's desperate cries, and the chaos that ensued. The room was in disarray, with overturned furniture, blood splattered on the walls and pooling on the floor. She shouted for help, but no one came. Neighbors heard everything, the thuds, the screams, the crashes, but fear kept them paralyzed. Behind closed doors, they listened to the violence unfold just feet away, unaware of the full extent of the horror. Fernando didn't stop his assault. He brandished an air pistol, not as a deadly weapon but as a means to instill fear, showing Elena that even in her last moments, he was in control. His aim was not just to inflict pain but to completely dominate her. She had tried to escape him and take back her life. Elena fought off her attacker, stabbing him in the chest and neck. Fernando followed Elena out of the apartment as she collapsed on the floor. He was covered in blood and had a knife in his hand. Neighbors heard her screams and called the police. She died minutes later in an ambulance on the way to the hospital. Fernando was taken to Harlem Hospital in critical condition and later charged with murder, burglary, and criminal mischief. Investigators looked into his history, uncovered alarming patterns of control, violent outbursts, previous incidents of harassment and assault. Court records showed that Fernando had consistently exhibited volatile behavior. Elena's death was not his first act of violence, it was the latest in a series of warning signs. The restraining order she obtained, which should have provided her some safety, ultimately failed her. Elena's family was devastated. Her mother struggled to accept that her daughter, a vibrant, funny, and kind-hearted individual who had tried desperately to escape her circumstances, was gone. The weight of grief was compounded by the realization that Elena had taken all the right steps. She sought help, established boundaries, and pursued legal action. Yet, none of these efforts were sufficient. As the news of the murder spread, people in New York took to the streets. Women marched to honor Elena, and vigils were organized in her memory. Her story sparked widespread outrage, resonating with countless women who have faced abuse. Elena's death became a poignant symbol, highlighting the failures of the system to protect those who need it the most. Hardy's family has set up a GoFundMe page to help pay for her funeral and transportation back to Arizona, and has already raised more than $10,000. After health has stabilized, at the precinct, Fernando Munera remained silent. He stared straight ahead, refusing to cooperate or provide any explanation or remorse. The detectives had no confession to rely on, just a troubling puzzle filled with obsessive behavior, digital clues, and broken lives. As the investigation progressed, a disturbing picture emerged. Fernando did not view Elena as a partner, he saw her as an object to own. When she tried to establish her independence, when she stood up for herself, he perceived it as a betrayal. In the months before the trial, the evidence against Fernando accumulated. Witnesses reported his strange behavior leading up to the murder. He was seen pacing, mumbling, and watching Elena's apartment. Surveillance cameras captured his movements in detail, showing his journey from the streets to the fire escape to Elena's fourth-floor apartment and crawled through an open window. Forensic evidence, including fingerprints, DNA, and injuries on Elena's body, provided further confirmation. There were no other suspects or uncertainties. The trial focused not on who committed the crime but on whether justice would be served. The courtroom was crowded on the first day of Fernando's trial, with every seat occupied. The atmosphere was heavy with emotions. Elena's family sat at the front, fixed on Fernando, who was responsible for their loss. The prosecution began by outlining a disturbing timeline, illustrating how Fernando had descended into possessive rage. They portrayed him as calculated and deliberate, emphasizing that this was not a spur-of-the-moment act but a planned attack. They presented footage of Fernando lingering outside Elena's building, his body tense and his expression filled with anger. They described how he had initially left but returned armed with both a knife and an air pistol, two weapons, signifying two conscious choices. There was no uncertainty, only a progression toward violence. Then came the photographs from the crime scene left everyone in the room speechless, walls stained with blood, furniture in disarray, and a life taken too soon. A forensic pathologist told the jury about the stab wounds on Elena's upper body. These wounds were not random or chaotic, they were deliberate and targeted. A neighbor recounted the sounds heard on the night of the murder, the crashing noise, faint screams, and then complete silence. Another neighbor mentioned seeing Fernando outside earlier that evening, pacing anxiously with clenched fists, talking to himself with a look in his eyes that suggested something dangerous was brewing. Elena's friends shared her final thoughts from the last days of her life. She had been terrified. She confided in them about the threatening phone calls, the pressure to change her appearance, and her constant fear. One friend read a message Elena had sent. Elena said that she was scared of what Fernando might do, but she didn't know how to make him stop. This statement hit hard, and the room went quiet. The defense presented a different narrative. They acknowledged the attack and the victim's death, but portrayed Fernando as a man who had lost control due to an overwhelming relationship. They argued that he had reacted impulsively after being locked out, claiming it was not a premeditated act but rather an emotional breakdown. They referenced his history of mental health issues, suggesting that his behavior stemmed from an undiagnosed condition. A psychologist testified about themes of trauma, instability, and mental decline. In contrast, the prosecution remained firm and clear. They asserted that Fernando did not simply lose control, he planned the attack. He paced back and forth, returned armed, broke in, and used two weapons to stab an unarmed woman 7 times before fleeing. This wasn't an emotional spiral, it was deliberate and calculated violence. His obsession was unrestrained, leading to a tragic outcome fueled by hatred. not a lapse in judgment. Fernando had made his choice long before that night, and Elena Hardy lost her life because of it. As the trial went on, the courtroom became a tense battleground where two contrasting images of Fernando Munera clashed. The defense depicted him as a broken man, filled with remorse and overwhelmed by circumstances. In stark contrast, the prosecution painted a much darker picture. In her final moments, Elena Hardy experienced terror, helplessness, and pain at the hands of a man who viewed her independence as defiance and wanted to control or destroy her. Elena's family attended every day of the trial. Her mother held a framed photo of her daughter, a symbol of a life once filled with joy and hope. Tears streamed down her face whenever the prosecution recounted the brutal details of the crime. Yet amidst the sorrow, there was determination. Elena's mother was resolute in her promise that Fernando would face justice for his actions. In their closing arguments, the prosecution emphasized their message clearly. They urged the jury to view Fernando not as a victim, but as a calculated aggressor. This was not a tragic error, it was a display of brutal violence. Elena was not his partner, she became his target the moment she tried to take back control of her life. The defense made one final attempt to restore Fernando's reputation. They highlighted his remorse, his troubled history, letters from friends who depicted him as kind and caring. However, these sentiments could not erase the stark reality. The evidence, including the images, witness testimonies, stab wounds, and months of increasing harassment, remained undeniable. The jury deliberated for hours. When the verdict of guilty for second-degree murder was read, the atmosphere changed dramatically. A mix of relief, sorrow, and a sense of finality filled the room. Elena's family embraced each other tightly. While this did not bring closure, since nothing could bring her back, it was a meaningful step towards justice. A month later, the courtroom convened again for the sentencing. Elena's mother stood to deliver her victim impact statement. Her hands trembled, her voice conveyed the deep sorrow of a life irrevocably changed. She talked about the void Elena left behind and the silence that now filled her home, contrasting with the joy of her daughter's laughter. The prosecution reiterated their case, this time emphasizing the consequences. They requested the maximum sentence, highlighting the deliberate nature of the crime, how Fernando had disregarded the restraining order, how the cycle of violence had escalated, and how society must seriously recognize the tragic loss of a young woman's life. The defense offered their remaining arguments, attempting to appeal to the jury's compassion. Then Fernando stood up. He was pale and visibly shaken as he faced Elena's family. He mumbled an apology, soft, strained, and nearly inaudible. "I'm sorry," he said. He never meant for this to happen. However, the courtroom remained silent. For those who had endured the pain of losing Elena, his words could not mend what had been broken. The hurt was too profound, and the apology came far too late. The judge announced the sentence with a serious demeanor. Fernando Munera sentenced to 40 years in prison. Elena's family embraced each other, tears streaming down their faces. It was neither a victory nor a moment of healing, but it represented justice, a small comfort amid their profound loss. Elena's story was just starting to inspire change. Her murder ignited a larger movement for action. Her family, determined that her death would not be the end of her narrative, became advocates against domestic violence. They collaborated with local organizations, initiated awareness campaigns, and organized events to educate others about recognizing the signs of abuse and the risks of overlooking warning signs. The restraining order that Elena had obtained, which was disregarded and broken, became a powerful reminder of how the system had failed her. Activists embraced her story, calling on lawmakers to strengthen protections for victims and ensure that violations have real consequences. Elena's friends frequently reminisced about the woman she was. They cherished her laughter, her determination, and her aspiration to become a physician's assistant. She was kind, ambitious, and vibrant. They ensured that when her name was mentioned, people remembered not just how she died, but who she truly was. Ultimately, Elena Hardy's story transcended being just a headline. It evolved into a movement, a reminder, a warning, and a call to action for those still living in fear. A 911 call reported a woman lying at the bottom of a staircase outside an apartment complex. Initially, it appeared to be a terrible accident. Perhaps she had tripped and fallen. Her keys and wallet were around her. Nothing seemed to be stolen, including her money. However, something felt off about the situation. When first responders arrived, they quickly determined that this was more than a simple fall. As detectives investigated further, they discovered evidence that transformed this case from an accident into a murder investigation. What truly happened to Danita Smith, and who wanted her dead? Danita Smith was born on November 20th, 1981, in New Bern, North Carolina. She was cherished by her parents, Calvin Lee Smith and Sharon Elaine Cook, along with her 3 siblings. Danita was naturally vibrant and full of life, making her presence impossible to overlook. Friends and family often remarked that she had the unique ability to brighten any room, thanks to her warmth, kindness, and infectious smile. Her happiness shone through in every photo, reflecting her joyful spirit. In school, Danita was a dedicated and hardworking student, earning the praise of her teachers. Her commitment led her to graduate high school with honors. She then attended North Carolina Central University, starting her studies in English. During her college years, Danita discovered a passion for photojournalism. She became captivated by the power of visual storytelling and how a single photograph could evoke strong emotions. With her usual determination, she pursued this new interest and quickly gained a reputation for her outstanding photography skills. In her personal life, Danita was happy with her fiancé, Jameer Stroud, a young police officer from Greensboro, North Carolina. They met in college and had a strong relationship for 6 years before getting engaged. For Danita, their engagement signified an exciting new chapter filled with hopes for marriage, career achievements, and building a future together. However, they faced a challenge: distance. After graduating in 2004, Jameer moved to Greensboro for his job, while Danita stayed in Durham. Although they were only about an hour apart, this physical separation limited their ability to see each other every day, making their relationship depend largely on weekend visits. Unfortunately, the distance may have also created an emotional gap. Unbeknownst to Danita, Jameer had started an affair with a colleague, Shannon Crawley, a 911 dispatcher and single mother of 2. On the morning of January 4, 2007, just after 10 a.m., a distressed call came into 911 from a man in Durham, North Carolina. He reported a shocking scene outside an apartment complex, a woman lying motionless at the bottom of the stairs, surrounded by blood. When first responders arrived, it was already too late. The woman was unresponsive. Moments later, authorities confirmed that the victim was Danita Smith. Detective Sean Pate from the Durham Police Department led the investigation and arrived at the scene to evaluate the situation. Initially, it looked like Danita had suffered a tragic fall. Her personal items, keys, wallet, were scattered around her, suggesting she might have lost her balance. There were no surveillance cameras to provide clarity, but as authorities examined Danita's body more closely, it became evident that she hadn't simply fallen, she had been murdered. A gunshot wound to the head was discovered, and her body's position had initially hidden the wound, leading others to mistakenly believe she had just fallen down the stairs. As officers reviewed her belongings, they found something odd. Her wallet still had a large amount of cash in it. If a robbery had occurred, it was unlikely the thief would have left the money behind. So what was the motive for the murder? After this shocking revelation, law enforcement quickly began searching the area for witnesses. The apartment complex, which mainly housed students, was usually busy, but fewer residents were there due to the holiday season. Nevertheless, officers found a few people who had noticed something unusual. The most significant statement came from the maintenance director of the complex. He reported seeing a woman leave the scene around the time of the incident. She was described as a tall black woman, driving a burgundy Ford Explorer. This important detail raised immediate concerns. Could this woman be linked to Danita's murder? The maintenance director had not only seen the woman but had also spoken to her. After hearing a gunshot, he noticed that she looked visibly shaken. When he asked if she had heard the shot, she confirmed that she had and appeared very upset. He proposed that they meet at another location to report the incident to the police together, but instead, she left the scene. As news of Danita's death spread, her loved ones hurried to the scene, including her fiancé, Jameer. Upon arrival, he sought out Detective Sean Pate, eager to speak with him. As is common in homicide investigations, authorities carefully examined the victim's significant other. When asked about his whereabouts that morning, Jameer said he had been home sleeping after working late the previous night, but he could not provide anyone to confirm his alibi. Although his defense wasn't very strong, the police were still gathering information, so they took note of his statement and allowed him to leave. After spending some time with Danita's family, Jameer returned home. The following day, investigators contacted him again with more questions. One important question was whether Jameer knew anyone who drove a burgundy Ford Explorer. His answer altered the course of the investigation. Without any hesitation, he named Shannon Crawley. This new information shifted the focus away from Jameer himself, who had initially been a suspect. When asked further, Jameer revealed that he had an affair with Shannon, which he described as a mistake. He mentioned that their romantic relationship ended nearly a year prior, largely because Shannon became pregnant in 2005. They decided to have an abortion, which marked the end of their romance. Although he claimed their relationship was over, Shannon continued to be a part of his life. Although they were no longer lovers, they still communicated regularly. Jameer described their connection as a strong friendship, but nothing beyond that. It became clear that Shannon might not have viewed their breakup in the same way. Even after they ended their relationship, Shannon remained involved in Jameer's life. She began attending his church, which he initially thought was just a coincidence. Then she bought a home nearby, which he also dismissed, thinking she simply liked the area. However, as investigators examined the timeline, it became evident that Shannon's feelings for Jameer had not diminished. Jameer stated that Danita and Shannon had never met, but during his conversations with investigators, he revealed an unsettling thought. He now believed Shannon had been stalking him for a while, although he hadn't recognized it before. Specific events started to make sense. He reiterated that he was the one who ended their relationship. Additionally, he remembered the last time he saw Shannon was on Christmas Eve of 2006, just weeks before Danita's murder. That night, he proudly entered the church with his fiancée Danita. Shannon was there and reacted with shock. She had no idea Jameer was engaged, or even that he was in a relationship. Until that moment, she might have thought they were about to reconnect, but she was confronted with the reality that Jameer was soon to marry someone else. Investigators had sufficient reasons to question Shannon directly. They went to her workplace to inquire about her activities on the morning of the murder. Shannon said she had been at home taking care of her sick child. She openly acknowledged her past relationship with Jameer and did not try to hide it. However, her account differed significantly from Jameer's statements to the police. Shannon claimed their relationship ended because she did not want children, while Jay said it ended after she became pregnant and had an abortion. When asked if she knew Danita, Shannon said she had never met her, believing Danita was Jameer's ex-girlfriend. This answer raised suspicions, suggesting that Jameer had kept his two relationships completely separate, making Shannon believe she was the only woman in his life. A key question arose: did Shannon own a firearm? She replied no, but investigators soon found out she was not telling the truth. A coworker of hers, Ronald Simpson, came forward with information that Shannon had bought a revolver from him in October 2006. This was significant because the gun matched the caliber used in Danita's murder. Not only did Shannon lie about owning a firearm, but she had also purchased it just months before Danita was killed. Detectives reviewed the phone records of both Shannon and Jameer. Jameer's records showed that his phone was at home during the time of the murder, supporting his alibi. While this did not completely exonerate him, since someone else could have used his phone, it was a positive indication for him. In contrast, Shannon's phone records revealed a different situation. Even though she claimed to have been at home all morning, cell tower data placed her in Durham, about 60 miles from her stated location, around the time of the murder, which brought her closer to the crime scene. When confronted about this evidence, Shannon maintained that she hadn't been in Durham that day, but the facts were not in her favor. The police then seized Shannon's burgundy Ford Explorer for forensic testing, specifically looking for gunshot residue. The analysis showed clear evidence of gunshot residue on the steering wheel, indicating that Shannon likely fired a weapon before or after driving the vehicle. This strongly suggested her involvement in the shooting incident. One last crucial detail was the testimony of the maintenance worker who talked to the woman running away from the scene. While there was no official record of a police lineup, the worker consistently described the suspect as a tall black woman driving a burgundy Ford Explorer. This description matched Shannon Crawley perfectly. On January 9, 2007, Shannon was arrested and charged with the murder of Danita Smith. Despite the serious charges, she was released soon after on a $100,000 bond, likely because she had no prior criminal record. Additionally, her role as a 911 dispatcher and the sole caretaker of her two young children likely influenced the court's decision to grant her bail. However, instead of waiting for her trial, Shannon and her attorney took an unexpected step in May 2007. They voluntarily went to the Durham Police Department to offer a new account of events, significantly changing the story. Shannon claimed that her ex-boyfriend, Jameer, had been stalking her after their breakup. She stated that he frequently called her, showed up at her workplace without warning, made her feel unsafe. According to Shannon, a worried coworker even offered her a gun for protection, knowing that Jameer, being a police officer, owned a firearm. She acknowledged that she took the gun but later regretted it and disposed of it shortly after. Shannon made a shocking revelation to the police. She stated that on the morning Danita was murdered, Jameer forced her at gunpoint into her own car. She alleged that he made her drive to an unfamiliar apartment complex, which was Danita's home. After taking her phone and keys, he exited the vehicle. She described sitting in the car for a long time, confused about what was happening, until she suddenly heard shouting. Although she couldn't understand the words, she recognized Jameer's voice arguing with a woman. Then, she heard a gunshot. According to Shannon, Jameer ran back to the car in a panic and demanded that she drive away. He got into the back seat, crouching on the floor and urging her to leave quickly. At that moment, she claimed to have seen a maintenance worker. She briefly stopped, hoping he would see that she was in trouble, but ultimately drove off because Jameer was pressing his gun against her back. However, there were immediate issues with her account. She needed to explain the gunshot residue found on the steering wheel of her car. She told the police that during their escape, Jameer had grabbed the wheel while moving from the front seat to the back, leaving the residue behind. Shannon was out on bond for nearly 2 years before her trial finally started on February 8, 2010. During the trial, the prosecution argued that Shannon had developed an obsession with Jameer and saw Danita as an obstacle to her future with him. They claimed that jealousy and a desperate need to eliminate the competition motivated her actions. In contrast, the defense argued that Shannon was being framed and that Jameer was the real culprit. However, Shannon did not provide any specific reasons for believing that Jameer would have committed the crime. Instead, she described him as violent and controlling, presenting him as a dangerous, unpredictable man. Despite the defense's efforts, the jury would hear about Shannon's past false allegations against Jameer, including the abuse accusation that had been thoroughly disproven. Her legal team fought aggressively to keep this information out of the trial, but they lost. The court allowed the jury to consider the fact that she had made false claims in the past, which was a devastating blow to her credibility. Jameer took the stand as the prosecution's star witness. He spoke about his relationship with Shannon, their breakup, and the troubling behavior she displayed afterward. He was articulate and presented himself as composed and credible. However, when it was the defense's turn to cross-examine, they highlighted one critical flaw. Jameer had spent years deceiving both Shannon and Danita. Then, the prosecution introduced a crucial piece of forensic evidence, the bullet fragment recovered from Danita's body. While the murder weapon itself had never been found, forensic experts confirmed that the bullet matched the type of gun Shannon had purchased just months before the crime. Shannon also took the stand. She repeated the same story she had told the police, insisting that Danita had forced her to accompany him to Danita's apartment, that she had no idea what was happening, and that she was merely an unwilling participant. She delivered her testimony with confidence, never wavering under questioning for a moment. It seemed like she was holding her own. Then the prosecution revealed what would be her undoing: tape recordings. Shannon had secretly recorded conversations with Jameer after Danita's murder, supposedly in an effort to get him to confess. These tapes had been provided to her defense team, but they had chosen not to use them. That alone was suspicious. The prosecution, however, had no reservations about playing the recordings in court. In the recordings, Shannon could be heard questioning Jameer about what had happened. At one point, he asked who she had been talking to. She denied speaking to anyone, but he continued to press her. Then he issued what seemed to be a chilling threat, warning that if she kept talking, he would find her. The voice on the recording sounded unusually high-pitched, nothing like Jameer's natural speaking voice. The prosecution seized the opportunity, pointing out the discrepancy. Even Danita's friends and family, who knew Jameer well, testified that the voice on the tape didn't sound like him at all. The implication was clear: Shannon had staged the recordings. The prosecution suggested that she had hired someone to impersonate Jameer in an attempt to fabricate evidence and shift the blame onto him. By this point, Shannon's credibility had been completely dismantled. In the end, the jury found Shannon Crawley guilty of Danita Smith's murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As for Jameer, he eventually left law enforcement and pursued a career in financial advising. He moved on with his life, getting married and starting a family. Yet, in the end, no outcome could undo the tragic loss of Danita Smith. By all accounts, she was a remarkable woman with a bright future. She had so much left to accomplish, so many dreams that would never come to fruition. But her memory remains alive, not only through the justice that was served, but in the hearts of her family and friends who continue to honor her life. The tragic murder of Danita Smith exposed a tangled web of jealousy, deception, and betrayal, culminating in Shannon Crawley's life sentence for a crime driven by unrequited obsession. While justice was served, it could not restore the vibrant life of a talented photojournalist whose dreams were cut short. Danita's legacy endures through the love of her family and friends, who cherish her warmth and spirit, and in the enduring lesson that truth, however obscured, will ultimately prevail. Lori K. Soares Hacking was born on December 31, 1976, and was adopted by Thelma and Geraldo Soares. They formerly lived in Fullerton, California. Geraldo is a Spanish and Portuguese teacher at Sunny Hills High School and a native of Piracicaba, Brazil. He met Thelma while they were both serving as missionaries for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Rio de Janeiro. Lori's parents divorced in 1987. Thelma and Lori moved to Orem, Utah the following year. In Orem, she attended Orem High School, where she was known for her organizational skills, determination, and vibrant personality. During high school, Lori met Mark Douglas Hacking. Their relationship quickly grew. They became a well-known couple, attending all the homecoming dances and proms together, appearing just like any other young couple in love. Mark, who was helpful and reliable, often spent time at Lori's house, assisting with errands, home repairs. This earned him a special place in Lori's family's hearts. Lori's brother jokingly felt jealous, as Mark received more attention from their mother and Lori than he did. However, Lori's family genuinely appreciated Mark's kindness and support. Lori and Mark's youthful romance blossomed into a strong relationship, leading to their marriage on August 7, 1999. By 2004, Lori was working as an assistant manager at a financial institution, while Mark, who had just graduated from the University of Utah, was preparing to start medical school at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Mark's decision to pursue medicine was expected, as he came from a well-educated family with several doctors, including his father and brothers, while another brother worked in government. In the summer of 2004, Lori and Mark planned to move to North Carolina. Lori, who was pregnant, was excited about the relocation, as was her mother, Thelma, who was eager to become a grandmother. Thelma hoped for a granddaughter with big curls like Lori's. On July 19, 2004, Lori, who was 27 years old and 5 months pregnant, suddenly disappeared. At around 5:15 a.m., She went for her usual jog at Memory Grove Park and City Creek Canyon before heading to work in Salt Lake City. When she did not return that afternoon, her boss contacted Mark. Concerned for her safety, Mark quickly called the police to report her missing. Mark arrived at Memory Grove Park at 10:07 a.m., aware that it was the last place Lori was supposed to be. He found her car in the parking lot, but the park was unusually quiet, making his heart race with fear. Patrol officers greeted him outside the park and updated detectives on Lori's disappearance. They feared the worst, thinking she might have fallen into the canyon, gotten injured, and become trapped in the thick woods. Given the situation, the patrol officers believed it was essential to involve homicide detectives. The steep canyon walls heightened their concern, as they worried that the pregnant woman might have been hurt and needed urgent help. Lori Hacking's mysterious disappearance shocked the community, leading to a flood of support from friends and family. Her husband, Mark Hacking, was visibly distraught as he appealed for help in locating his missing wife. His public requests for assistance caught the attention of various media outlets, and he eagerly spoke to any reporter asking about Lori, expressing his deep worry and asking for help in the search. Officers from the Salt Lake City Police Department are actively investigating the case and have organized a large-scale search at Memory Grove Park. They are seeking the help of at least 3,000 volunteers to assist in searching for Lori or any evidence that she may have been present in the area. Many homes are located along the path leading to Memory Grove Park, where Lori was reportedly last seen. The officers are thoroughly canvassing the area, looking for anyone who might have witnessed something unusual. Lori is easily recognizable with her distinctive bushy dark curls, and the officers believe residents would likely remember her. Their hopes were momentarily lifted when a woman claimed to have seen Lori near Memory Grove that morning, but she later retracted her statement. As the search for Lori continued, the Salt Lake City Police Department established a command post near the entrance of the park. Mark's brothers and Lori's mother arrived at the scene. One of Mark's brothers suggested checking a homeless encampment in the canyon, voicing concerns about the potential involvement of those living there in Lori's disappearance. The detectives understood the importance of exploring all avenues and decided to investigate the encampment. There are no suspicious signs here. They realized that uncovering the truth would be challenging and that every detail needed thorough examination. Detectives arrived at Mark and Lori Hacking's home. They were already aware that in many missing persons cases, the partner is often the primary suspect. They also considered the possibility that Lori might have had a romantic relationship with someone else, which could have played a role in her disappearance. The detectives asked Mark for permission to enter their apartment and to obtain a recent photograph of Lori for their missing person flyer. Mark agreed, allowing them to enter the apartment. After entering the residence, the detectives asked Mark for permission to do a quick search, which he agreed to. During the search, one detective found a red handbag that belonged to Lori. Inside the handbag was Lori's wallet, complete with her identification and credit cards. The detectives were puzzled as to why Lori would go to Memory Grove Park for exercise, leaving her car near the entrance but not taking her purse with her. Additionally, the detective spotted a large bouquet of flowers on the kitchen counter, which led her to believe that Mark had bought them for Lori as an apology. This detail raised her suspicion about potential issues in their marriage, as she recalled that husbands often give large bouquets to express remorse. While investigating the bathroom, the detective noted that it was exceptionally clean and had a strong smell of bleach, suggesting someone had recently scrubbed it with disinfectant. This finding intrigued the detective, as it indicated an effort to hide something. In the bedroom, she observed a set of sheets on the bed that looked brand new, with visible creases and no signs of having been washed. When she checked Lori's jewelry box, she noticed that Lori's wedding band was missing, which struck her as odd. The detective wondered why a happily married woman would not be wearing her wedding ring. Mark met YTH, a detective at the police department, for an interview. The detective asked him questions about his marriage, and Mark claimed that everything was fine. Given the growing evidence and suspicions against him, this statement seemed questionable. Mark mentioned that he and Lori were packing to move to North Carolina, where he would soon start medical school. This information caught the detective's attention, and she became curious about his intended specialty. When she asked, Mark surprised her by saying he would specialize in oncology. As the interview progressed, the detective closely observed Mark's behavior. He seemed to be crying, but they never saw any tears, which made them suspicious and led them to believe that he might be pretending. They felt deep inside that something terrible had happened to Lori, suspected Mark was involved, but they still hoped Lori was alive and could be saved. The detectives asked Mark for permission to search his red truck. While they searched the vehicle, Mark was present. On the seat, the detective found a receipt from a mattress company dated the same day Lori went missing. This raised questions. Why would Mark buy a new mattress on the day his pregnant wife disappeared? Determined to find more evidence, they returned to Mark's apartment and asked for his signature on a consent form that would allow a more thorough search. Mark agreed, giving the detectives permission to enter his home. Once inside, the detective confronted him with a receipt they had found. They also noticed a new mattress on Mark and Lori's bed. This finding prompted further questioning. The detective asked Mark about the mismatched mattress and box spring, suggesting it had been bought recently. Mark's reaction indicated that this struck a nerve. While continuing their search, the detectives made another discovery that heightened their suspicions. They found several knives on the nightstand next to Mark's bed. One knife was hidden in a sheath, and when they examined it, they noticed red stains on the blade, which they suspected were human blood. When questioned about it, Mark claimed he used the knife for hunting. When the detective found the knife, they stopped the consensual search of the house and called in a crime scene investigation team. They started working on getting a search warrant because they believed something serious had happened in Lori's home. While checking the area, detectives noticed a trash can in the parking lot, leading them to suspect that Mark had killed his wife and dumped her body in the trash. Around the same time, the night watch officer informed the police investigating Lori's disappearance that Mark had been seen running around naked at a local motel. This incident increased suspicions about Mark's involvement and added to the evidence suggesting he played a role in Lori's disappearance. When an officer arrived at the motel, he found Mark behaving oddly and completely naked. However, the officer observed that Mark had the presence of mind to put on his shoes before running around the parking lot, which made the officer suspect that Mark was pretending to act strangely. A person in an abnormal state would not even realize they were walking barefoot. That afternoon, a detective visited Mark at the hospital and was surprised to see that he showed no signs of emotional distress. Instead, he appeared relaxed and content, enjoying pizza and watching television. The detective began the interview by asking the same questions as before. Mark maintained that Lori had never returned home from her morning jog. During the interview, Douglas Hacking, Mark's father, was present and urged him to be truthful if he had done something wrong. However, Mark looked back at his father with a determined expression, insisting that he had not done anything. Douglas was confident in his son's honesty and believed him. While the investigation into Lori's disappearance was ongoing, detectives received information from officials at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. They informed the detectives that Mark Hacking, who was supposed to start an oncology program there, was not enrolled and that they had no record of him. They presented this information to Thelma, Lori's mother, hoping to clarify Mark's true intentions. Initially, Thelma refused to accept the detectives' claims, perceiving them as mere speculation. However, her disbelief wavered when the detectives revealed that Mark had never graduated from the University of Utah. This shocking revelation made Thelma reconsider past events, and she recalled signs that something was off. At Mark's supposed graduation ceremony, she remembered hearing him sick in the bathroom, which prevented him from attending the event. They believed that Mark's deception had finally caught up with him, which might have contributed to Lori's disappearance. On July 20th, 2004, one day after Lori went missing, a store clerk from a nearby shop reported an important detail to the detectives. The clerk recalled that on the evening of July 18th at 9:45 p.m., Lori and Mark entered the store and bought a soda. The detectives reviewed the store's CCTV footage from that time and confirmed the clerk's story. The video showed Lori wearing green scrub-style pants and a tan shirt, along with Mark as they entered the store. This was believed to be the last confirmed sighting of Lori alive. The search for Lori lasted 3 days and involved hundreds of volunteers. Her mother, Thelma, made a heartfelt appeal to the public. urging anyone who might have Lori to release her, emphasizing the extreme heat in a canyon, which often exceeded 100 degrees in July. Despite the challenging conditions, the search efforts remained strong. Meanwhile, Mark was in the hospital recovering from a mental health crisis. His brothers, Scott and Lance Hacking, growing suspicious of his potential involvement in Lori's disappearance, confronted him again. On July 24, 2004, Mark eventually confessed to killing Lori. He explained that she had found out he was not actually a graduate of the University of Utah, where he claimed to be attending medical school in North Carolina. This revelation devastated Lori, making her feel betrayed. Before she could file for divorce, Mark took drastic action by shooting her and disposing of her body in a dumpster. After Mark admitted to his brothers, the search for Lori in the canyon shifted to the landfill. Nearly 30 officers were sent to the 10-acre landfill to search for her body. In the 2 days following the disposal, they had to sift through a massive amount of waste. First-degree murder charges were filed against Mark Hacking on August 9, 2004. The search for Lori was extensive and physically challenging, especially with the high temperatures. Many agencies and professionals worked together in this effort. They used cadaver dogs and equipment like earth movers to help find any evidence. These tools were essential in narrowing down the search area and uncovering important leads. On October 1, 2004, at 8:20 a.m., human remains were discovered in the landfill. This was a major breakthrough in the case, bringing hope for answers regarding Lori's disappearance. The remains were carefully examined and identified using dental records, confirming that they belonged to Lori Hacking. This information provided a clear conclusion to the search, offering some closure for her family. On April 15, 2005, Lori's husband, Mark Hacking, pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. He was sentenced on June 6, 2005, to 6 years to life in prison. The Utah State Board of Pardons later stated that he would not be eligible for parole until 2035. That means Hacking will face a minimum of 30 years in prison. Board Chairman Mike Sibbett emphasized that the hearing does not guarantee a release date. He stated that there were several aggravating factors in Hacking's case that merited a stay. He emphasized that Hacking obstructed justice by disposing of Lori's body and falsely claiming she was missing. In honor of Lori, her family chose to remove Mark Hacking's last name from her headstone. This decision aimed to celebrate Lori's memory and assert her independence in light of Mark's actions, emphasizing her individuality and the strength she showed throughout her life. A year after Mark Hacking was convicted of murdering his wife, Lori Hacking, it was revealed that he had been involved in illegal activities while in the Central Utah Correctional Facility in Gunnison, Utah. He was found to be selling personal items, such as autographed memorabilia and other prison-related items, on a website called Murder Auction. Initially, Mark denied the allegations, but later, after an investigation, he agreed to stop his online sales. This revelation caused public outrage and raised new concerns about the integrity of the prison system. On November 23, 2013, in Santa Cruz Harbor, California, Forrest Hayes, a prominent figure in the tech industry, was found dead. His body was located on his luxury yacht, the Escape, which he owned. He was discovered unconscious in one of the cabins, and attempts to revive him were unsuccessful. Local law enforcement responded after the yacht's captain called for help. The circumstances surrounding Forrest's death were puzzling. He was lying on his back with no signs of struggle. An injection mark was visible on his arm, but no syringe or medical supplies were found nearby, raising questions about whether his death was accidental or intentional. The cabin appeared disordered. There were 2 wine glasses on a small table, one with lipstick marks, indicating he had company. All the windows were covered with curtains, and the lighting was dim, contributing to an atmosphere of privacy. The scene looked strangely staged, yet there were no clear signs of violence. The yacht's captain told the police that Forrest often used the boat for private outings. He noted that Forrest liked spending time alone on the yacht, but he also had guests from time to time. The coroner's initial assessment indicated that an overdose could be the cause of death. However, at the start of the investigation, it was unclear if this overdose was by accident or on purpose. The lack of a syringe near the body raised further questions. To find answers, investigators began looking into Forrest's life, including his contacts, business dealings, personal relationships, and the events leading up to his death. The main question in the investigation was, who was with Forrest in the last hours of his life? The presence of a wine glass with lipstick suggested that a woman might have been involved. However, neither the captain nor the harbor staff saw anyone exit after Forrest boarded the yacht. The investigation began by examining Forrest's phone, which was found near his body. An initial review of his apps and messages did not show anything suspicious, but detectives chose to look deeper into his personal life. As they explored Forrest's connections and habits, it became clear that his seemingly perfect life could be hiding unexpected secrets. Uncovering these secrets became a key goal for law enforcement as they sought to understand what happened aboard the Escape that tragic evening. Forrest Hayes was born on May 10, 1962, in Dearborn, Michigan. From a young age, he showed exceptional learning abilities. His curiosity, problem-solving skills, and natural charisma made him a leader among his peers. Teachers and classmates often praised his dynamic personality and commitment to excellence, which set the stage for his future success. After graduating from high school, Forrest attended a prestigious university where he studied engineering and computer science. He quickly mastered the latest technologies and began developing his own projects, which caught the attention of major tech companies. His career took off in the early 1980s, during the early growth of the information technology industry. A key moment in Forrest's career occurred when he joined Apple in 2005. At that time, Apple was rapidly expanding and working on innovative products like the iPhone and iPad. Forrest took a position in a crucial department focused on developing new technologies. His contributions to Apple's projects were so impactful that he quickly gained the respect of both his colleagues and the leadership team. Forrest was not just a skilled professional, he was also an innovator with a unique ability to find unconventional solutions to challenging problems, making him an invaluable team member. Colleagues remembered Forrest's unwavering determination to implement innovative ideas that improved the functionality and accessibility of Apple's products. During his time at Apple, he worked on technologies that later became industry standards. However, he didn't rest on his successes and soon accepted a position at Google, joining the company in 2007. At Google, he became part of Google X, a division focused on developing advanced technologies. His role involved overseeing projects related to autonomous vehicles, smart devices, and other innovative advancements. Notably, he contributed to the creation of self-driving vehicle systems, a significant breakthrough in autonomous transportation. Colleagues described Forrest Hayes as an inspiring leader who motivated his team to reach ambitious goals. He was strict but fair, promoting a positive work environment. Forrest embraced challenging tasks, which earned him the respect and admiration of his colleagues. His ability to blend strategic thinking with attention to detail enabled him to successfully lead large-scale projects that shaped the future of technology. Forrest's professional success was closely connected to his family life. In 1996, he married Denise Hayes. Together they built a strong relationship based on understanding and support. They had 5 children: Lauren, Danielle, Lily, Roscoe, and Zosia. Forrest was not only a successful businessman but also a dedicated father. Even with a busy work schedule, he always prioritized his family. Those who knew him said he loved spending time with his children, planning family trips, and creating traditions that brought them closer. Their family life seemed joyful. They living in a $4 million home in one of California's finest neighborhoods, which offered a peaceful and comfortable environment. Forrest's biggest joy came from outings on his yacht, the Escape. To him, the yacht represented family togetherness. He regularly took his family on short trips, enjoying quality time and relaxation away from the busy city life. Friends and colleagues admired how he balanced his career success with his family commitments. He exemplified the ability to manage both professional achievements and personal responsibilities. Although Forrest appeared outwardly harmonious, he sometimes shared with close friends that he felt empty inside. He had accomplished everything he had ever dreamed of, yet it didn't fully satisfy him. This sense of restlessness may have pushed him to pursue new experiences and interests, ultimately resulting in tragic outcomes. A key part of Forrest's secret life was his use of the app Seeking Arrangement. This platform connects wealthy individuals with younger partners for informal relationships that often involve financial support. Forrest actively used the app, and an investigation into his account showed that he had been messaging many women, setting up meetings, and negotiating the terms of their interactions. His relationships were not just casual. Forrest was known for generously supporting his partners by covering their expenses, giving them expensive gifts, and meeting in private settings. One such location was his yacht, which originally served as a family vessel for short trips but later became a personal getaway for him and the women he met through the app. The yacht offered the privacy, allowing him to avoid unwanted attention. The captain of the yacht, employed by Forrest, later informed the police that it was frequently used for these meetings. He recalled that Forrest sometimes took women on short trips or spent several hours alone with them on board. The captain noted that these encounters happened often but were covered by a confidentiality agreement. Alcohol was typically involved, and in some cases, illegal substances were also present. Messages found on Forrest's phone showed he discussed acquiring these substances, and occasionally, his partners would bring them at his request. This information shocked his colleagues and family, who were completely unaware of his secret life. Investigators paid special attention to a woman Forrest had met through Seeking Arrangement. A week before his death, he arranged to meet her on his yacht, where they spent the evening drinking wine and using substances that made Forrest feel unwell. In messages after their meeting, Forrest acknowledged he wasn't feeling well but expressed no desire to stop these activities. Forrest lived two distinct lives. In one, he was a dedicated husband, father, and respected professional. In the other, he sought excitement and a break from his daily routine. His colleagues and friends were unaware of this hidden side of him, and his family believed his yacht trips were simply a way for him to manage stress. These private meetings, which Forrest viewed as a release from his demanding job, ultimately had tragic consequences. The yacht, once a symbol of his achievement and independence, became the place where his two lives intersected, leading to his untimely death. This situation forced both investigators and Forrest's loved ones to reevaluate their perception of a man they had believed was perfect. Alex Tichelman was born on April 8, 1987, in Canada. Her biological parents are unknown because she was adopted by Leslie Ann and Bart Tichelman at a young age. They provided her with a stable and loving home, along with financial security. Leslie Ann worked in retail, while Bart held an executive position at a major company, which gave the family a respected social status. Alex grew up in a joyful environment. She thrived in school, particularly in literature, and aspired to become a writer. Her teachers appreciate her creativity and imagination. Besides her academic success, she enjoyed sports and actively participated in school competitions. Her parents were proud of her accomplishments, invested in her education, and supported her dreams. During her adolescence, Alex started experiencing a range of problems. At 14, she randomly tried cannabis, which led her to gradually engage in more risky behaviors. Initially, she experimented with lighter substances, but by 16, she had begun using harder drugs. This shift had a significant impact on her life. She began to skip school, quit sports, and distance herself from her parents. Leslie Ann and Bart worked hard to support their daughter. They consulted psychologists and took her to counseling, but things only got worse. In a last-ditch effort to help her, they sent Alex to a private rehabilitation school in Maine that had a strict approach for dealing with troubled teens. They hoped that being away from her usual surroundings would help her get back on track. Unfortunately, her time at the school did not yield the desired results. Alex struggled to adjust and soon returned home, where she reverted to her old habits. By the age of 18, Alex had left school. She explored different career paths, including journalism, but quickly lost interest. Her progress was repeatedly hindered by her battles with substance abuse. This addiction made it difficult for her to build a personal or professional life. In 2010, Alex moved to San Francisco, hoping to start fresh in the entertainment industry. She created a YouTube channel to share makeup tutorials and her daily life, but the project did not succeed, leading to more disappointment. In search of a way to distinguish herself, she ventured into modeling. However, she found that the conventional modeling standards did not fit her, so she decided to focus on fetish photography. She took part in BDSM-style photo shoots that emphasized shock and provocation. While this choice helped her connect with an audience, it did not provide her with financial stability. Alex continued to struggle with her addictions, living from one job to another and facing ongoing challenges. In 2011, Alex started using the Seeking Arrangement platform to connect with wealthy partners who could offer her financial support and a more luxurious lifestyle. Through this platform, she met Forrest Hayes. Their relationship began with typical discussions about the terms of their meetings. Forrest was looking for a companion for private gatherings on his yacht, Escape. He offered financial assistance and generous gifts in return. For Alex, this was a chance to gain the stability she needed. Initially, their meetings were casual and included wine and light conversation. However, things changed when investigators found out that Forrest sometimes asked Alex to bring illegal substances to their meetings, promising her extra money for doing so. Alex saw this as a way to earn more, and as a result, their meetings became more frequent, primarily taking place on the yacht Escape. One important person in Alex Tichelman's life was Dean Riopelli, the owner of popular nightclubs in Atlanta. Their relationship began in 2011, quickly drew attention because of their significant age difference. Dean was 51, while Alex was just 24. Despite this gap, they were both fully engaged in a lively and intense lifestyle. Dean was not only a successful entrepreneur but also a dedicated rock musician. His clubs played a key role in Atlanta's music scene. His band frequently performed there. Known for his charm, energy, and love for a free-spirited lifestyle, Dean became a major influence in Alex's life, who was seeking both stability and affirmation. Their relationship was filled with the wild excitement typical of rock and roll, including party. However, beneath this glamorous exterior, there were significant conflicts. Dean's friends and colleagues observed that Alex often triggered arguments. Her impulsive behavior, worsened by alcohol and substance use, made their relationship unstable. In September 2013, just weeks before the unfortunate incident involving Forrest Hayes, Alex reported Dean to the police, claiming he was aggressive. However, when the officers arrived, they discovered a different story. Witnesses stated that Alex was acting erratically that night. She had drunk too much alcohol, created a disturbance at a club, and even attacked Dean, including biting his finger and leaving marks. Consequently, Alex was charged with filing a false report and assault. This situation illustrated the ongoing tension in their relationship, which, despite hints of affection, was deteriorating due to persistent conflicts. A few weeks later, on September 24, 2013, Dean was found unconscious in his home. Alex called emergency services, stating that he had collapsed after a long night of partying. She said she had briefly gone to the bathroom. When she returned, she found him on the floor. Paramedics arrived and declared him dead at the scene. An autopsy indicated that the cause of death was a heart attack related to an overdose of illegal substances. However, this finding raised doubts among Dean's friends and family, who insisted that he strongly opposed banned substance use and avoided even basic painkillers. Their belief made the official death ruling seem inconsistent. Despite their concerns, the case was closed due to lack of evidence of foul play. Dean's death, initially deemed accidental, came back into the spotlight in 2014 when Alex was arrested in connection with the case of Forrest Hayes. During the investigation, police found similarities between the two cases. The substances linked to Forrest's death were the same as those found in Dean's system. This discovery led to the reopening of Dean's case. Additionally, Alex's mysterious social media posts heightened suspicions. Dean's family supported the reopening of the case, arguing that the original investigation was too superficial. They believed Alex's involvement with illegal substances indicated that she might have played a role in Dean's death, but no solid evidence was ever found to connect her directly to the incident. Despite the renewed investigation, Dean's case remains officially closed, and Alex's suspected involvement has never been proven. This uncertainty continues to leave unanswered questions. Investigators were able to piece together the events from the night Forrest was found dead using evidence, witness statements, and video footage from cameras on the yacht. On November 22, 2013, Forrest arrived at the yacht named Escape in the afternoon, as was his usual routine, and boarded by himself. Soon after, Alex joined him on the yacht. According to the captain, Forrest had asked the crew to leave for the evening because he wanted privacy and a relaxing night. The functioning cameras on the yacht captured footage of Forrest and Alex in the main cabin, where they were talking, laughing, and drinking wine. Alex brought a bag, which was later found to contain banned substance and syringes. As the night went on, their conversation became more informal, and Alex took out a syringe filled with a substance. She injected herself first and then offered it to Forrest, who accepted. The camera recorded the moment she injected him. Shortly after being injected, Forrest's health quickly worsened. He lost consciousness and collapsed on the couch. At first, Alex did not realize the seriousness of the situation. She kept drinking her wine and looking around the cabin. Eventually, she tried to wake Forrest by shaking him, but he did not respond. Frightened when she realized he was not waking up, Alex began to panic. She hurriedly packed her belongings, including the syringes and leftover drugs, in an effort to eliminate potential evidence. She also wiped the wine glass she had used to remove her lipstick marks, although she missed some of them. The video showed her quickly drawing the cabin curtains, checking the area to ensure no clear evidence of her was left. Afterward, Alex left the yacht without informing anyone of what had occurred, leaving Forrest unconscious on the couch. For several hours, no one checked on him. It was only later, when Forrest's worried wife reached out to the captain, that he returned to the yacht and found Forrest's lifeless body. The investigation found that Alex attempted to go into hiding after the incident. She turned off her phone and left the marina to avoid being found. However, video footage from the yacht, lipstick marks on a wine glass, fingerprints, and text messages exchanged between Forrest and Alex on his phone helped investigators reconstruct what happened. Alex's behavior on the yacht suggested she played a significant role in the tragedy. A critical question still lingered: was the injection intentional, or was it a reckless choice? Once Alex was identified as a main suspect in Forrest Hayes' death, law enforcement initiated a manhunt to find her. After the incident, Alex disappeared, which further fueled suspicions about her involvement. With her phone off and her previously active social media account silent, tracking her became increasingly difficult. Investigators developed a strategy to track down Alex using her profile on Seeking Arrangement. This app became crucial for locating her. They created a fake profile of a wealthy man looking for new companions. Despite trying to stay low-key, Alex couldn't resist the promise of financial benefit and agreed to a meeting. After several days of communication, she set up a rendezvous at a quiet location in California. When Alex arrived, she was arrested by law enforcement. The operation went smoothly. She did not resist arrest, though her demeanor was described as calm and indifferent. During the arrest, she claimed not to understand the charges against her, but she was soon formally charged with second-degree manslaughter, evidence tampering, and illegal distribution of controlled substances. The trial began in early 2014 and quickly attracted media attention because of Alex's appearance and controversial background. She became known as the beauty-turned-criminal. Her photos, past interviews, and courtroom behavior were frequently discussed. Alex maintained a calm and confident demeanor, often dressing stylishly, which elicited mixed reactions from the public. The prosecution argued that Alex was fully aware of the risks involved in her actions. They presented video evidence from the yacht showing her giving an injection to Forrest and then leaving without helping him. They claimed this showed her indifference and attempts to avoid responsibility. In contrast, Alex's defense team argued that she acted at Forrest's request, did not intend to cause harm. They maintained that his death was a tragic accident and that she left in a panic. They also pointed out that Forrest had requested the substances and consented to the injection. Public opinion was sharply divided. Some viewed Alex as a heartless criminal responsible for the death of a successful and respected man, while others saw her as a victim of circumstance, questioning the ethics of Forrest's actions, including his use of a dating app and engagement in risky behavior. In May 2015, Alex reached a plea deal with the prosecution. She admitted to involuntary manslaughter and possession of illegal substances in exchange for a shorter sentence and the chance to avoid a jury trial. Alex was sentenced to 6 years in prison, with credit for the time she had already spent incarcerated. This decision led to a renewed debate. Some people thought the sentence was too light given the situation, while others believed it was appropriate because there was no solid proof of intent to harm. After completing her sentence, Alex was deported to Canada, her birthplace, in 2017. Despite this, her name continued to appear in discussions and articles about high-profile crimes. To the public, Forrest became a representation of double lives, risky choices, and the significant consequences of reckless decisions that resulted in a tragedy affecting many people. After her release, Alex tried to rebuild her life. For a while, she stayed away from the public, avoiding media interviews and social media. A year later, she did her first major interview with a Canadian journalist through video call. In the interview, Alex appeared calm and composed, but many perceived her as emotionally detached. Her account of the events reignited controversy, sparked new discussions about her actions and their aftermath. She stated that she never meant to harm Forrest Hayes and was shocked by his death. Alex claimed that she had given him the injection at his request, insisted that she was unaware of any existing health problems he might have had. She believed that Forrest was aware of his limits, was in control of his actions. Additionally, she denied trying to hide evidence, explaining that her actions were the result of panic and poor judgment in the moment. Her statements contradicted the evidence in the case. Footage from the yacht showed Alex not only cleaning up evidence of her presence but also leaving without trying to get help. This raised further doubts about her honesty, drew sharp criticism from Forrest's family, who accused her of trying to deflect blame. Her comments about Dean Riopelli were equally controversial. In the interview, Alex described their relationship as troubled yet real, claiming she was devastated by his death. However, she avoided questions about the cause of Dean's overdose and the details of their last meeting. Her lack of response only increased suspicions among Dean's family, who had earlier called for the case to be reopened, stating that Alex's statements generated more questions than answers. The investigation into Dean Riopelli's death remains unresolved. In 2018, the Fulton County District Attorney's Office stated that the case was under review, but there have been no updates since then. Reports suggest that investigators did not find any new evidence to confirm or deny Alex's involvement, leaving Dean's family uncertain. Currently, Alex Tichelman lives in Canada and maintains a mostly private life. Her social media accounts are inactive, and journalists have had little success reaching her for comments. Some view Alex as a victim of unfortunate circumstances, while others regard her as cold and calculating, believing her actions contributed to two tragedies. The deaths of Forrest Hayes and Dean Riopelli raise many questions. Were they really accidental? What was Alex Tichelman's involvement in these tragic situations? On March 1, 2019, it was a chilly Friday evening in Harold Hill. Amy's Park, a popular local spot, was filled with the usual crowd of teenagers unwinding after a busy week. 17-year-old Jody Chesney, an energetic student, was at the center of it all. She sat with her boyfriend, Eddie Coyle, and a group of 5 friends on a picnic bench, enjoying their time together as laughter mixed with the sounds from a portable speaker. As the clock approached 9:25 p.m., the atmosphere in Amy's Park changed. Earlier, around 9 p.m., Jody's group had noticed 2 people hanging around, but they didn't think much of it since strangers often visit parks. The 2 left quietly and disappeared into the night. However, about 30 minutes later, they returned, but this time, they weren't just passing by. The 2 figures approached Jody's group deliberately, moving swiftly through the darkness. Without any warning or conversation, one of them suddenly attacked. Screams echoed through the air as Eddie caught her when she collapsed, leaving her friends in shock. Unfortunately, despite the paramedics' efforts, they couldn't save her. Metropolitan Police have sealed off the park and launched a murder investigation. Harold Hill was not known for such incidents. While London did face issues with knife crime, Amy's Park was considered a safe haven for children. Neighbors placed flowers and written tributes at the park's entrance. Purple ribbons, Jodi's favorite color, were tied to fences. The police pledged to find answers, but time was of the essence. Each hour without a lead made the investigation more difficult. First, let's explore Jodi's life. After her parents separated when Jodi was 6, her father, Peter, became a devoted single parent to Jodi and her older sister, Lucy. Their home was filled with love, despite the challenges they faced. Peter described Jodi as an affectionate child who sought connection but was also quite shy. However, she gradually flourished, largely due to the support of a primary school teacher who helped her gain confidence. In 2012, when Jodi was 10, Peter married Joanne, who willingly embraced her role as stepmother. Jodi and Joanne developed a close bond that Jodi treasured. Joanne noted that Jodi longing for the maternal connection she missed, and together they worked to nurture that relationship. Jodi's home was filled with laughter, thanks to her playful sense of humor. Joanne often referred to her as a wind-up toy because of her boundless energy that brightened their days. Jodi's teenage years were largely shaped by her dedication to the Girl Scouts. She poured herself into the program, burning badges, hiking up mountains, and canoeing with her troop. In addition to her scouting achievements, she was a self-taught pianist who effortlessly played the piano. She was also just 3 weeks away from completing her Gold Duke of Edinburgh Award. At Havering's Sixth Form College, where she studied photography, psychology, and sociology, her principal praised her as an excellent, hard-working, and focused student. Jodi aspired to work with animals or children and was determined to make a positive impact in the world. Her friends remembered her for her ability to make them laugh. Her sense of humor blossomed when she overcame her childhood shyness. Jodi's relationship with her sister Lucy was incredibly strong. Even with 2 years between them, they shared everything: secrets, laughter, and aspirations. Lucy saw Jodi as her other half, someone who always prioritized others' needs. Their home in Dagenham was a welcoming place for Jodi's friends, who were drawn to her warmth. She had no enemies and had a special talent for making everyone feel included. Even her dog was part of her life. Jodi enjoyed taking him for walks, which provided a sense of stability amid her busy schedule. On March 1, 2019, Jodi's day began like any other. It was a Friday, and she woke up in her Dagenham home with her dad Peter, stepmom Joanne, and sister Lucy. Jodi was excited not only for the weekend but also for her dad's upcoming birthday. She had been discussing gift ideas with Joanne, eager to find the perfect present to make Peter smile. At 8 a.m., she shared a heartfelt message on Instagram, "Happy birthday, Dad," accompanied by a heart emoji. This post would later deeply affect those who viewed it, gathering many comments following her death. Jodi spent her morning at Havering's Sixth Form College, where she was in her second year of A-levels. After her classes ended around 3 p.m., she left college with her backpack over one shoulder, looking forward to the weekend ahead. Back in Dagenham, Jodi had one last thing to do before her evening plans. She took Dog, the family's Yorkshire Terrier, for a walk, a routine that she cherished. By 4:30 p.m., she was back home, catching up with Joanne and Peter, who were preparing to celebrate Peter's birthday. Jodi mentioned that she would be spending time with friends later, which was a typical Friday night for her. Jodi grabbed her jacket, said her goodbyes, and left around 5:30 p.m., promising to return later. She made her way to Romford railway station, a quick bus ride away, to meet her boyfriend, Eddie, and a group of friends. By 6:30 p.m., the group of 6 teens, including Eddie, had gathered and were animatedly discussing their plans for the evening. Their gathering was recorded by surveillance cameras. Romford was their usual hangout, a popular spot for East London teens, filled with shops and fast food restaurants. That night, however, they decided to go to Amy's Park in Harold Hill, about a mile from Havering College, another favorite spot for them. The park featured a playground in the center and benches where teens would gather after dark. By 7:30 p.m., they were settled on a picnic bench, playing music from a portable speaker. just the kind of relaxed night Jody enjoyed. They had a great time together. At around 9 p.m., Jody's group spotted two figures in the park. They didn't seem unusual since Amy's Park is a public area where people come and go. The two stayed for a short time but left without engaging with anyone, disappearing into the night. Jody and her friends paid them no mind, enjoying their music and conversation. However, at 9:20 p.m., the same two figures returned, this time moving with a noticeable intent. According to police reports from the Metropolitan Police, they approached Jody's group directly, cutting through the darkness. One figure was dressed in dark clothing, and his face was hidden. The other figure was less clear, appearing as a shadow beside him. Without warning, the first attacker stabbed Jody in the back with such force that the knife broke, causing a severe 7-inch wound that collapsed her lung. Chaos erupted in the park. Eddie's scream shattered the night, and her friend stood frozen in shock. Eddie caught her as she fell, holding her on the ground and desperately calling for help. The two attackers quickly disappeared into the darkness. In a panic, Eddie called emergency services, urgency in his voice as he pleaded for an ambulance. Nearby residents were alerted by the screams. A woman began CPR, not realizing that the broken knife was still lodged in Jody's back. A man in a van stopped to assist, applying his coat to the wound, while another friend to help stop the bleeding. Paramedics arrived within minutes, but Jody's injuries were severe. Despite their efforts, she was declared dead at 10:26 p.m., just over an hour after the attack. Amy's Park was turned into a crime scene, marked off by police tape as forensic teams searched for evidence. Jody's friends, still in shock, told the police there was no argument or warning, just a sudden, unprovoked attack. The Metropolitan Police's homicide and major crime team took control of the investigation, with Acting Detective Chief Superintendent promising to find those responsible. As the investigation progressed, detectives focused on Jody's last hours, using witness accounts and phone records to confirm her movements. A key moment in the case came when a local man contacted the police. He reported seeing two men run out of the park on the night of Jody's attack and get into a black Vauxhall Corsa before driving away quickly. The witness also mentioned that there was at least one other person in the car, the driver. CCTV footage played a crucial role in the investigation. The streets of Harold Hill, equipped with various cameras, provided a collection of unclear images. By March 2nd, police had reviewed footage from St. Neots Road and nearby Retford Road, showing two males leaving Amy's Park around 9:25 p.m. One wore a dark jacket with a noticeable pattern, while the other wore a hoodie that covered his face. On March 3rd, the police arrested 20-year-old Manuel Petrovich. The black Vauxhall seen at the crime scene was registered to him. Petrovich denied being involved in Jody's murder, claiming that his car had been stolen during a robbery at knife point. However, he later acknowledged that he owned the Vauxhall and had a mobile phone he used for selling cannabis. He refused to identify anyone he was with that night because he was concerned for his own safety and his family's safety, stating that people had already come to his house looking for him. During further questioning, he described the events of the night Jody died but referred to the attackers as Man A and Man B out of fear. Petrovich explained that on March 1st, he was with a friend who received a call from Man A asking for a ride. They picked up Man A and another person, Man B, and drove to Harold Hill for Man A to collect some cannabis and money. According to him, Man A and Man B got out of the car at Harold Hill, leaving Petrovich and his friend inside. He said the two men were away for about 5 minutes and seemed calm when they returned, noting that there was nothing unusual about their behavior. He stated, "Nothing about them made me suspicious. I did not see either of them carrying anything. My friend and I were told that Man A was collecting money and banned substance." After dropping off the two men, Petrovich claimed that a black male threatened him with a knife and took his car keys. He said that the next day, he heard about a girl who was stabbed in Harold Hill and hoped it wasn't related to his earlier encounter with Man A and Man B. Detectives identified a second suspect, a 19-year-old known to frequent the Harold Hill drug scene, based on witness descriptions of a black male in his late teens. To keep him from knowing he was a suspect, police kept his name confidential, referring to him as Suspect A in initial reports. The investigation continued to grow. A woman in her 40s who lives across the street from Amy's Park reported seeing suspicious individuals coming and going for weeks, especially at night. She also noted a young teenager who resembled suspect B, suggesting he was running errands for older men. These accounts indicate a possible connection to banned substance activity, as there is a known issue with cannabis in Harold Hill, often involving teens as runners. Detectives believe Jody's group may have been mistaken for rival banned substance dealers. Although Jody has a clean record and no known ties to banned substance, this complicates the investigation. By March 10th, 9 days after Jody's death, the police were making significant progress. Acting on a tip, officers from the Metropolitan Police's Homicide and Major Crime Command focused on a house on Rogers Road in Dagenham, connected to Aaron Isaacs' uncle. They believed Svensson, referred to as Man A, and Isaacs, known as Man B, were hiding there after the attack. At 7 p.m., armed officers surrounded the location, with body cameras recording. In a dramatic turn of events, 19-year-old Svensson Ong-Akwai tried to escape by climbing over a rear flat roof but fell through a conservatory, shattering glass everywhere. A policeman approached and handcuffed him. Svensson's phone had texts linking him to Petrovich and discussing business in Amy's Park. When officers searched his home, they found a jacket that matched one seen in CCTV footage, with traces of Jody's blood on it. Meanwhile, 17-year-old Aaron Isaacs attempted to escape through a window but was caught in the back garden, where he had discarded a rucksack containing a large knife, 2 toothbrushes, and hair mousse, an unusual combination that raised suspicion. The police didn't stop there. They also arrested a 16-year-old boy, a friend of Manuel Petrovich, whose name was withheld for legal reasons, on suspicion of involvement in the crime. The police were casting a wide net, recognizing that Harold Hill's banned substance scene involved numerous runners and dealers. By May, all 4 individuals were facing charges. Svensson and Aaron were charged with murder, while Petrovich and the 16-year-old were charged with murder and manslaughter. Svensson was born on March 29, 2000, grew up in Harold Hill, near Amy's Park. He was raised by his mother and has 4 sisters. His childhood was troubled, primarily due to his father. In 2017, Svensson was kicked out of his home for disrespectful behavior and subsequently lived in a social services hostel in Romford. He described himself as a boxer hoping to become a professional. However, Svensson has criminal convictions for possessing and supplying cannabis and other banned substances. Transporting banned substance between London and rural areas, a risky environment where violence was common. In 2018, he violated a 6-week suspended sentence related to handling stolen jewelry. During the interrogation, Svensson remained calm. He acknowledged being in Amy's Park but insisted he was only there to pick up cannabis. He denied stabbing Jody and instead accused Aaron of being responsible for the attack. Aaron, born on January 27, 2002, faced many challenges from a young age. He lived in a flat with his mother and brother. His childhood as troubled. His mother dealt with mental health issues, and he had been in contact with children's services since he was 4 years old. Aaron's criminal record included offenses such as carrying a screwdriver, causing bodily harm, possessing cannabis, and stealing a vehicle. When he was detained, he was uncooperative, even throwing a rucksack that contained a knife during his arrest. During questioning, he claimed he was simply hanging out with Svensson and insisted he had no knowledge of the knife. He told the detectives that he didn't touch Jody's, blaming Svensson for the attack and saying he ran away out of fear. Manuel Petrovich, the suspected driver, is a 20-year-old local from Romford with connections to banned substance circles. Although not much is known about his background, he was considered a trusted associate of Svensson and frequently lent his car for various operations. In a leaked prison conversation that prosecutors received, Petrovich acknowledged that Svensson had been planning activities in Amy's Park and mentioned that they had set him up a couple of months prior. He stated that he remained in the car and did not learn about the attack's outcome until later. Petrovich denied the murder charges, asserting that he was unaware Jody was the target and had no intention to cause harm. He explained that Jody's group was mistakenly identified as the intended targets, as they were in the same area. They went to confront their rivals but ended up attacking the wrong people, he told a friend, not realizing he was being recorded. Anticipating arrest, Svensson took extreme measures to hide his actions. He burned his clothes after the attack, except for his jacket. Aaron also disposed of his clothes, and both men fled to Dagenham in an attempt to escape the police. During their interrogations, they played a blame game, each pointing fingers at the other. Svensson claimed he was only a lookout, while Aaron argued he wasn't involved in the plan. However, the evidence against them grew: the blood-stained jacket, phone records indicating they had conspired together, and CCTV footage showing them at the crime scene. As the formal charges were laid out, the community in Harold Hill struggled to understand the senseless motives behind the crime. Jody, a Girl Scout who had no ties to banned substance, became an unwitting victim in a conflict she was unaware of. While the arrests brought some relief, they did not provide closure. Jody's family, especially her father Peter, wanted justice. Peter established the Jody Chesney Foundation, a charity aimed at diverting young people from knife crime. The foundation's website described Jody as a kind person who accepted everyone. Purple ribbons emerged as symbols of her memory, with vigils and scouting events celebrating her compassion. Jody's legacy reached beyond Harold Hill, igniting national discussions about knife crime. The foundation supported youth programs, and Peter advocated for stricter laws, although he told that no law will bring her back. The trial began on September 17, 2019, at the Old Bailey, one of London's most historic courts. For defendants stood accused: Svensson Onyekwai, 19, Aaron Isaacs, 17, Manuel Petrovic, 20, and a 16-year-old boy, unnamed for legal reasons. The courtroom was heavy with emotion. Jody's family, including her dad, Peter, stepmom, Joanne, and sister, Lucy, attended nearly every day, wearing purple ribbons in her memory. The prosecutor asserting that all four defendants played a role in a brutal act of unprovoked violence linked to a turf war. He explained to the jurors that Jody was completely innocent and had been mistakenly identified as a rival by the assailants who normally visited Amy's park. He emphasized damaging evidence, including CCTV footage showing Petrovic's black Vauxhall Corsa near the park, a blood-stained jacket belonging to Svensson, and phone records that connected the group to a premeditated attack. He also referenced a conversation in prison where Petrovic admitted that Svensson intended to target rivals but ended up attacking the wrong people. The prosecutor claimed that Svensson was the person who stabbed Jody, with Aaron enthusiastically supporting him, while Petrovic and the 16-year-old boy assisted in the attack. This was not a spontaneous act, the prosecutor told, highlighting that the group intended to inflict serious harm, making them all responsible for murder under joint enterprise law. The defense teams actively sought to clear their clients of wrongdoing. Charles Sherrard, who represented Svensson, acknowledged that his client was present in the park but denied that he was the one who stabbed Jody. Sherrard pointed to Aaron as the real attacker and argued that Svensson's clothing, a white hoodie and gray tracksuit, did not match the description of a figure dressed in black provided by witnesses. Sarah Forshaw, who defended Petrovic, claimed her client was only a driver and unaware of any violent plans. If Petrovic had known what was going to happen, he would have turned off his phone like Svensson did, she asserted to the jurors. Natasha Wong, representing Aaron, contended that he was merely a runner without any intent to commit violence, denying that he carried a knife or was aware of Svensson's plans. Louise Sweet, who defended the 16-year-old, emphasized his lack of a violent history and urged jurors to view him as a bystander rather than an active participant. Each defense relied on the absence of direct evidence, such as DNA on the knife, in hopes of creating reasonable doubt. After 45 hours of testimony, which included Eddie Coyle's description of the attack and forensic evidence of an 18 centimeters deep wound, the jury deliberated for just over 5 hours. On November 7, 2019, they reached their decision. Svensson Onyekwai and Aaron Isaacs were found guilty of murder, while Manuel Petrovic and the 16-year-old were acquitted of all charges. Sentencing took place on November 18, where Judge Wendy Joseph condemned the pathetic location dispute that resulted in Jody's death. Svensson Onyekwai, identified as the one who stabbed Jody, received a life sentence with a minimum of 26 years, while Aaron Isaacs, his accomplice, received life with a minimum of 18 years. The courtroom was emotional as impact statements were read. While the verdict offered bittersweet relief to Jody's family, Peter, speaking outside the court, stated he was over the moon about the convictions but heartbroken over his loss. Jody's sister Lucy wrote in her statement, she was only 20 years old, and already she dreaded her life. Joanne believed that Petrovich, as the driver, should have faced consequences, but the family chose to focus on preserving Jody's memory. The Jody Chesney Foundation is actively working to make a difference. They hosted a fundraiser in 2024 that raised £10,000 for workshops aimed at preventing knife crime, as reported on their website. Jody Chesney's life, vibrant and full of promise, was tragically cut short on March 1, 2019, in a senseless act of violence that shook Harold Hill. The convictions of Svensson Almukwai and Aaron Isaacs brought a measure of justice, but no verdict could heal the void left in the hearts of her family and community. Through the Jody Chesney Foundation, her father Peter channels grief into action, raising funds to combat knife crime. Purple ribbons, Jody's favorite color, continue to symbolize her compassion and the collective resolve to honor her memory. Her legacy endures, inspiring a national call to end the scourge of knife crime and ensure no other family endures such loss. Though Jody is gone, her light shines on in every step taken to make communities safer. Mike Reischel married his first wife, Dee Dee Hoffman, in 1979 while they were students at the University of Florida in Gainesville. Mike seemed to have it all. From an early age, Mike showed outstanding qualities. He was a dedicated Boy Scout, nearing the rank of Eagle Scout, and an altar boy, reflecting strong moral values. At the University of Florida, he joined a fraternity, developing athletic skills and excelling in academics. He later earned a Master of Business Administration from the University of Miami, paving the way for professional success. Dee Dee, his wife, noted that Mike was a supportive husband who never physically abused her. However, their relationship had reached a breaking point. They had 2 daughters, Caroline and Kate, whom Mike loved deeply. Despite his accomplishments, he spent long hours traveling for work, causing his daughters to become accustomed to his absence during their early years. After 25 years of marriage, Dee Dee informed Mike that she wanted a divorce. She then moved out of their home to provide their daughters, Caroline and Kate, a familiar place to return to during their college breaks. At 49, Mike found himself single for the first time in many years and wanted to find love again. In the mid-2000s, as internet dating became popular, he created a profile on Match and soon connected with Susan O'Brien Reischel, a 38-year-old Hispanic nurse. As their relationship developed, Mike and Susan enjoyed great dates and trips together. Shortly after they met, Susan moved into Mike's home, taking over the space that had been Dee Dee's. When Caroline first met Susan, she was worried about her father's new girlfriend. Caroline was surprised by how much Susan drank at their first meeting. Despite having several martinis, Susan was able to walk and talk normally. This behavior was unusual for Caroline, raising concerns in her mind. In 2007, despite Caroline's concerns, Mike and Susan got married. This marked a significant change in their lives, as Susan stopped working and Mike stopped traveling for his job. Instead, he bought a local business called Ocala Dental Care, which became central to their daily lives. To outsiders, Mike and Susan seemed like the perfect couple. They lived in an affluent neighborhood in Alachua County, Florida, known as Highly Plantation, and often joked about their seemingly ideal life together. However, underneath this facade, they were facing serious challenges in their marriage. In the summer of 2007, Mike proposed a prenuptial agreement to Susan, which surprised their friends and family. They had always been seen as a strong and united couple. What led Mike to suggest a prenup? The turning point was an incident at one of his daughter's parties. Susan, who had a fiery personality, used foul language in front of Mike's daughter, leading to an intense argument. This incident prompted Mike to think about protecting his assets in case their marriage ended in divorce. Mike and Susan seemed financially secure, but there were hidden problems. Susan revealed to Mike that she had $35,000 in credit card debt, which worried him greatly. One significant is Susan in their relationship was Susan's negative feelings toward Mike's daughters. Caroline mentioned that the only time she could talk to her father was when he was alone in his car. Susan's dislike for his daughters created a barrier, preventing Caroline from having meaningful discussions with her father. Even though Mike and Susan encountered challenges, their relationship appeared to improve, at least outwardly. In 2016, when Caroline announced her engagement, Susan became very involved and wanted to play a major role in planning the wedding. She insisted on hosting a bridal shower for Caroline, even though this is usually a responsibility of the bride's mother or sister. While organizing the shower, Susan intentionally left out Caroline's mother's friends from the guest list but made sure to invite her own family and friends. Although it was somewhat unusual for Susan to be so heavily involved, Caroline ultimately found the shower enjoyable, appreciating the effort Susan put in to make it fun and memorable. When Caroline was choosing her wedding dress, Susan went with her to the bridal boutique. They looked at various dresses together until Caroline found one she loved. Susan even used her credit card to pay for the $1,000 gown. In November 2017, Caroline married at Oheka Castle in Long Island, with 160 guests in attendance. The wedding was opulent and had the grandeur fit for royalty. Before Mike walked his daughter Caroline down the aisle, she noticed a strange mark on his face. When Caroline asked him about it, Mike dismissed her concerns, wanting to avoid upsetting her on such an important day. 3 weeks after the wedding, Mike revealed to Caroline that the mark had become a long white scar, which was the result of physical abuse by his wife, Susan. He shared that Susan had been arrested for domestic battery after she became violent while drunk. Susan, on the other hand, described the incident differently. She claimed that after Caroline's wedding, Mike told her that the event had gone $150,000 over budget, which made her very angry. This led to a heated argument between them. During the confrontation, Susan threw her phone at Mike and pushed him in an attempt to calm things down. Ironically, it was Susan who called 911 to report the situation. She said she intended to leave for their beach condo to help defuse things, but she took too long to depart. Consequently, when she hadn't left the house, the police arrested her. The court later mandated that Susan stay away from Mike, and she sought help for alcohol is Susan's, counseling, and anger management. After some time, Mike chose not to file charges against Susan, leading to the case being dropped. Susan moved out of their home and into a condo in Ponte Vedra. While this gave her a break from the couple's ongoing conflicts, it was temporary. On February 3, 2018, at 3:30 a.m., Mike Reischel made a disturbing call to 911 from his home in Gainesville, Florida. He told the dispatcher that someone had entered his house and that his wife, Susan, was bleeding heavily. When the police arrived, they found Susan seriously injured on the bed in the master bedroom. Medics were called immediately, and they rushed her to the nearest hospital. As she was taken into surgery, doctors worked hard to save her life. She was in critical condition, and her chances of survival were slim. Meanwhile, a detective arrived at Mike's home, which had been secured as a crime scene. He began investigating, carefully looking for any clues. What he discovered was alarming. In the master bedroom, there was a large amount of blood on the bed and a bloody bent knife, but no signs of forced entry through doors or windows. To understand what happened, the detective reviewed security camera footage from Mike's house. However, after examining the footage, he found no one leaving the house. Susan miraculously survived the attack but suffered serious injuries to her wrist, stomach, and neck. Once she regained consciousness in the hospital, she shared a startling account with the detectives investigating the case. Susan revealed that there had been no intruder. Instead, it was Mike who had attacked her. She claimed Mike had fabricated a story about someone breaking into their home and assaulting them. Susan explained that they had begun arguing during dinner at a local restaurant and decided to return home in separate cars. When she arrived home, she went straight to bed. As she was falling asleep, she suddenly felt a sharp stabbing pain. When she opened her eyes, she found Mike standing over her, holding a knife. Overcome with panic, she shouted, "Michael, you are going to kill me." To her horror, Mike responded, That's exactly what I want to do." Susan's cries for help went ignored as Mike continued to stab her, leaving her in extreme pain and covered in blood. For an hour, she lay in bed, bleeding heavily and terrified for her life. Mike told her that he wouldn't kill her if she agreed to claim that an intruder had broken into their home and attacked her. Desperate to survive, Susan reluctantly went along with his story. He then changed his clothes and called 911, pretending that a robbery had happened. Mike Rayashel was arrested for the attempted murder of his wife, Susan. The news shocked many, including his ex-wife, Dee Dee, and his daughters. Dee Dee, who had divorced Mike years ago, found it hard to believe the allegations. She had never seen any signs of violence during their marriage and couldn't wrap her head around the accusation against her former husband. Similarly, Caroline and Kate were stunned by their father's arrest. They had always viewed Mike as a kind and generous man. The idea that he could hurt their stepmother was unimaginable. As events progressed, Mike faced more charges alongside the attempted murder charge. He was indicted for false imprisonment, obstruction, and tampering with evidence. These new charges made the situation more complex and serious. Because of Mike's wealth, the judge set a bond of $2.5 million for these additional charges, but no bond was allowed for the attempted murder charge due to its severe nature. Mike's arrest shocked the community. Many who knew him and his family struggled to reconcile their views of him with the serious charges he was facing. In June 2018, while awaiting trial in jail for the attempted murder of Susan O'Brien Rayashel, Michael Rayashel was accused of hiring a hitman to kill his wife. According to sources, Rayashel contacted Roderick Jermaine McCullum, a 33-year-old inmate, to plot Susan's murder for $100,000, providing details about Susan's home and a floor plan. McCullum was also charged with conspiracy, but the case was sealed due to the ongoing investigation. Eventually, the charges were dismissed, and Mike's daughter Caroline called the idea so absurd it was laughable. It is important to note that in November 2017, Susan was arrested for domestic violence after throwing a phone and punching Mike in the arm during an argument over Caroline's wedding expenses. Mike reported to the police that Susan had a drinking problem and had repeatedly abused him, which led to a restraining order. Susan denies the charges of violence, and the case was dropped when Mike chose not to pursue Susan's prosecution. The 2019 trial shed light on the troubled relationship between Mike and Susan. During the proceedings, Mike described their marriage as strained and tumultuous. He explained that they rarely had visitors at their home, mainly because Susan was opposed to Mike inviting his friends from his former university's advisory board. Another source of conflict was Mike's involvement in charitable activities. He stated that while he enjoyed making donations, this sometimes led to disagreements with Susan. Mike mentioned that she would frequently threaten to divorce him if he attended committee meetings, country club events, or made donations without her approval. Mike expressed that he struggled with conflicts regarding charitable contributions, while Susan's spending habits appeared to go unchecked. He stated that Susan frequently bought clothing and jewelry without discussing it with him. This difference in how they managed their finances contributed to the stress in their marriage, leaving Mike feeling frustrated and overwhelmed by their ongoing financial difficulties. Additionally, he testified that Susan sometimes resorted to violence to resolve disputes. For instance, in July 2016, he claimed that Susan threw a wine bottle at him from the top of the stairs, hitting his shoulders. This was not an isolated incident. He mentioned other times when she threw vases and heavy mugs at him. He did take pictures of his injuries and shared them with his daughter, Caroline. Mike consistently insisted during the trial that, despite experiencing abuse, he loved his wife and wished to stay married to her. However, he felt he had to tread carefully around her, always worried about her reactions. On February 3, 2018, Mike invited Susan to dinner, hoping they could improve their relationship. He chose their favorite steakhouse, believing a change of environment and a romantic setting might help. Unfortunately, during dinner, Mike received a text from his daughter, Caroline, which upset Susan. The atmosphere turned awkward and tense, and Susan's anger grew, prompting her to leave the restaurant in an Uber. After the meal, Mike followed her in his car. On their way home, Susan texted Mike, implying she thought Caroline would sabotage any future relationship he had. When Susan and Mike returned home that night, they communicated through text messages rather than speaking. Susan let Mike know that she was going to file for divorce and would be leaving the next morning. At around 10:13 p.m., she sent him one last message about his serious as Susan's with boundaries regarding his daughter. While Susan was alone in the guest room, Mike unexpectedly entered and attacked her. She felt pressure in her upper abdomen and noticed a knife in his hand. Susan claimed that Mike insisted they were not getting a divorce and described a violent struggle during which he sliced her left thumb. She stated that he stabbed her multiple times and slashed at her wrists, leaving her with serious injuries. She testified about losing a significant amount of blood, which caused her to vomit and lose control of her muscles and bodily functions. Mike reportedly told her that he would stay with her until she died. However, Mike provided a different account of the events. He said that he entered the bedroom and saw Susan on the bed with a knife. A fight broke out over the knife, which resulted in Susan being fatally stabbed in the stomach as they fell onto the bed. Mike, however, did not clarify how Susan also sustained stab wounds to her neck and thumb during the incident. In his testimony, Mike said he meant to call 911 for help after accidentally injuring Susan in the struggle. However, Susan reportedly asked him not to make the call because she was afraid of being arrested again for domestic violence. According to Mike, they lay together as she bled for several hours. The prosecution argues that if Mike's account is accurate, he and Susan were in a blood-soaked bedroom filled with vomit and human waste. Mike reported that at 3 a.m., their dog entered the messy bedroom, which led him to get out of bed to attend to the dog. During this time, Susan took a knife and harmed her wrists, allegedly saying she was afraid of going to jail. Mike asserted that he reassured Susan he wouldn't get her arrested and instead chose to lie to the police, claiming he would protect her. They then agreed on a fake robbery to call the emergency services. As part of his plan, Mike disabled the security cameras to make it look like a break-in occurred at around 2:42 a.m. At 3:30 a.m. on February 3rd, he called 911 and turned the cameras back on. The prosecution argued that Mike's actions showed he intended to harm Susan. They claimed that his willingness to lie about what happened and manipulate the surveillance footage indicated he was trying to hide his involvement in the crime. In contrast, the defense argued that Mike acted out of a desire to protect his wife. They asserted that Susan's attempted suicide stemmed from her mental health as Susan's and that Mike was trying to save her when he turned off the camera and lied to the police. A bloodstain pattern analyst testified in Mike's defense, stating that he reviewed medical records supporting Mike's account. The analyst explained that if Susan had cut her wrist around 10 p.m., as she said, she would have died from blood loss. However, if Mike's version of events was accurate, it was more plausible that she survived the incident since medical help arrived shortly afterward. The prosecution dismissed Mike's claims about wanting to reconcile with his wife. They presented evidence showing that Mike had visited 3 dating websites, suggesting he was not serious about mending their relationship. In response, Mike's defense pointed out that he had also looked at websites aimed at helping battered husbands. After a 9-day trial, the jury deliberated for 4 hours before returning with a guilty verdict for Mike Reischel on attempted first-degree murder and other charges. In December 2019, he was sentenced, but Susan chose not to attend the hearing. Mike's daughter, Caroline, spoke in court, expressing her pride in being his daughter. She shared how compassionate and selfless Mike had been throughout the years, always prioritizing others. Several of Mike's friends also spoke up, describing him as kind, gentle, and a true gentleman. Although the prosecution sought a 50-year sentence, the judge decided to impose a 30-year sentence on Mike. Considering Mike's age at the time of sentencing, it's probable that he will spend the rest of his life in prison. Toni was the only girl in a family with 2 brothers. Growing up as the only daughter, she embraced her tomboy side while also embodying the charm of a traditional Southern belle. Being raised in a household of boys made her independent and assertive, allowing her to thrive in male-dominated settings while still exuding femininity and grace. After graduating from high school, Toni decided to further her education by attending college and medical school. She was a dedicated student who excelled, ultimately graduating at the top of her class. Throughout her life, Toni was determined to succeed as an ophthalmologist, becoming a respected doctor. Despite her professional accomplishments, she longed for love and companionship. Although she married young, she quickly realized that the relationship lacked chemistry and compatibility. The divorce was a challenging time for Toni. Eventually, she used her career to help cope with the pain, but over time, she recognized that it was time to open her heart to love once again. At 30, Toni decided to start dating again, but her past experiences made her cautious and reserved. Although she was initially hesitant, she gradually began to open herself up to the idea of love. She met new people and explored possible relationships, but letting go of her past and accepting the idea of true love proved challenging. Like many others, Toni thought online dating could help her find her soulmate. With strong faith being central to her life, she chose to join a Christian dating site in search of a partner who shared her beliefs. During her online dating experience, Toni went on several dates with interesting men, yet she struggled to find someone with whom she genuinely connected on a deeper level. Despite the ups and downs, Toni remained optimistic that she would eventually meet the love of her life. Just when she felt like giving up, she came across Harold Henthorn, a charming and attractive man who captured her interest. His dating profile portrayed him as a confident and successful individual living in Colorado. What stood out to Toni was Harold's sincere desire to find love again after experiencing loss. He revealed that he was a widower, having lost his first wife, Sandra Lynn Henthorn, in a car accident, that he had patiently waited a long time for a second chance at happiness. As Harold and Toni continued their online conversations, Harold decided to visit Mississippi to meet Toni in person. When he met Toni's friends, he easily charmed them with his warm and engaging personality. They quickly recognized that Harold and Toni were a perfect match. His lively nature balanced Toni's more reserved demeanor. From their first meeting, Toni felt a deep connection with Harold, sensing he was her soulmate. Their relationship developed rapidly. By Valentine's Day 2000, Harold proposed to Toni with a beautiful ring. Overjoyed, Toni accepted, excited to start this new chapter with her Prince Charming. Less than a year after they met, on September 30th, 2000, Toni and Harold got married in a beautiful church ceremony in Mississippi. After the wedding, they moved to Colorado, where Harold lived. Toni quickly became a skilled doctor, treating her patients with the care and attention of family. Her exceptional bedside manner ensured that every patient felt heard, understood, and cared for, reflecting her compassion and commitment to her profession. Toni's life centered on her career as a doctor and her relationship with Harold. Together, they created a warm home, supported one another. As the years went by, they welcomed a daughter, Haley, who brought immense joy to their lives. Time passed, and Toni Henthorn and her husband Harold continued to build a fulfilling life together. Just 2 weeks before their anniversary, Harold contacted the office manager at Toni's ophthalmology practice. Eager to assist, the manager listened as Harold shared his plan for a surprise. He wanted to take Toni to Rocky Mountain National Park to celebrate their 12th wedding anniversary. Understanding how passionate Toni was about her job and her patients, the office manager ensured that Toni's schedule remained open. On September 28, 2012, Harold visited Toni's office. The office manager led Toni into an exam room, expecting her to see a routine patient. To her surprise, she found her husband Harold waiting for her. Harold had a surprise. They were going on a weekend getaway. He reassured Toni that he had arranged for a babysitter for their young daughter, Haley, and had already packed her bag. Toni happily agreed to the unexpected trip. As they began their trip, Harold let Toni know that their first night would be spent at the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park, Colorado, which inspired Stephen King's novel, The Shining. When they arrived at the hotel, they enjoyed an early dinner before heading to their room. Harold had carefully planned trails for them to explore the next day. On September 29, 2012, they set out to hike in the beautiful Rocky Mountain National Park. Their day started off peacefully, filled with excitement about the stunning views and the promise of a wonderful day outdoors. While America's national parks are celebrated for their breathtaking scenery, they also come with hidden dangers. A study by Backpacker magazine reveals that, on average, 243 people die in national parks each year, underscoring the risks involved in wilderness exploration. In Rocky Mountain National Park, falling was the leading cause of death. As time went on, Harold and Tony moved further into the Rocky area. Just before 5:54 p.m., Harold made a distressing call to 911, sounding panicked as he told the dispatcher that Tony had fallen off a cliff and was in critical condition. The dispatcher quickly sent a park ranger, who was also a trained EMT, to help. However, the ranger had to walk through difficult terrain to reach Harold. While on the phone, Harold urgently pleaded for a helicopter to rescue Tony, but the dispatcher explained that a helicopter couldn't reach them because of the high altitude and challenging terrain. Although the dispatcher tried to reassure Harold that help was on the way, he could sense Harold's fear and desperation. After a while, Harold ended the call because he was worried his cell phone battery might die, leaving him unable to call for help. As the ranger searched the park, the sun began to set, creating a creepy atmosphere. To help the ranger find him, Harold decided to start a fire. About an hour after his first call, Harold reached out to emergency services again. This time, the dispatcher tried to guide him through CPR to save Tony's life, but Harold insisted on hanging up, saying he needed to keep the line open. While the ranger continued looking, the dispatcher called Harold again and asked him to use his whistle to help the ranger locate him. Harold blew the whistle to signal that he was nearby. Unfortunately, by the time the ranger and emergency services arrived, more than 2 hours after Harold reported Tony's fall, it was too late, and Tony had already died. All deaths in national parks are carefully investigated, and this case was no different. Harold told the ranger about the hike that led to Tony's tragic death. He mentioned that at 1:45 p.m., he and Tony started their hike on the Deer Mountain Trail and stopped to take a selfie. The trail was crowded with many hikers, so they moved deeper into the woods. Harold said they reached their destination around 3:30 p.m. and had lunch on the mountain. He took a photo of Tony during this time. However, the area where they had lunch was too noisy for them to enjoy their meal, so they decided to head further down the mountain to find a quieter spot. Harold shared that Tony had seen wild turkeys and wanted to get closer to photograph them. Unfortunately, she fell 128 feet down the mountain while trying to take pictures. After Tony's tragic death, Harold returned home to a wave of support from family and friends. His daughter, Haley, was profoundly affected by her mother's passing. She also received a lot of love and support from those around her. However, amid the sympathy, rumors began to spread about the nature of Tony's sudden death. Tony's friends found it strange that she had died only a year after nearly losing her life in a previous accident. A year before, while cleaning under the deck, Harold had accidentally struck a loose beam, causing it to fall on Tony's head. She was rushed to the hospital but luckily survived, despite suffering bruises and injuries that took time to heal. Given this history, Tony's friends began to wonder if there was something suspicious about her death. They questioned whether the earlier accident was genuinely accidental or if there was more to the story. On the day of the funeral, people grew suspicious when Harold seemed more focused on watching a football game than grieving for his wife among family and friends. The FBI began investigating Tony's death. Agents interviewed the ranger who first arrived at the scene the day Tony died. The ranger reported that there was no evidence Harold tried to perform CPR on his wife. Further investigation revealed more concerning details, including that Harold's cell phone sent signals from the area where Tony fell 9 times. These signals led investigators to suspect that Harold might have scouted the location with the intention of killing his wife. The FBI received a call indicating that Tony was not the first wife of Harold. This discovery raised concerns about Harold's potential involvement in the death of his previous wife. Lynn and Harold were married in September 1982 and lived in Colorado. On May 6, 1995, shortly after 9 p.m., a woman and her family were driving on Highway 67 in rural Colorado when they noticed a man in the street signaling for help. It was Harold Henthorn. He appeared anxious and quickly approached their vehicle, asking for assistance. Harold explained that his wife, Lynn, was trapped under their car. He claimed that while they were fixing a flat tire, the jack had collapsed, pinning Lynn underneath the vehicle. The woman and her family quickly jumped in to help lift the car off Lynn. As they worked, they saw that her lips were blue and she wasn't breathing. It was a frightening sight, especially in the cold weather. Lynn was only wearing a tank top and jeans, leaving her vulnerable, in need of warmth. Recognizing how serious the situation was, the woman and her family immediately took action. They placed their coats over Lynn to help keep her warm. Since it was the mid-1990s, there were no cell phones nearby. After driving 2 miles, the woman who assisted Harold found a house with a phone. She quickly called emergency services to report the urgent situation. The dispatcher confirmed that help was on the way, but emphasized that time was critical. When the police officers and paramedics arrived, they gave Lynn a shot of epinephrine to restart her heart. Fortunately, this worked, and her heart began beating again. She was then taken to a nearby hospital for more treatment. Sadly, despite this initial improvement, Lynn passed away at the age of 37. While Lynn was receiving treatment, one of the EMTs attempted to gather information from Harold. However, Harold was uncooperative and kept distancing himself from the medic, making it hard to obtain the necessary details. The medic found Harold's behavior strange. He did not seem anxious or concerned about his wife's condition. From these observations, the medic concluded that Harold did not appear to care genuinely for Lynn's well-being, which raised doubts about his intentions. When medics successfully restarted Lynn's heart, Harold appeared shocked, possibly even disappointed. Despite the freezing weather, he didn't take off his jacket to cover his injured wife, which puzzled the medics who expected him to care for her comfort. Meanwhile, bystanders seemed more focused on helping Lynn than supporting her husband, adding to the medics' confusion. An autopsy revealed that Lynn died from asphyxiation. This finding led to an investigation into her sudden death. However, a few days later, the medical examiner determined that her death was accidental and closed the case. At that moment, no one suspected that Lynn's death was anything but straightforward. The case was considered resolved, and there were no signs of foul play. Detectives investigating Tony's death in 2012 hired a private investigator to look into Lynn's death, which had occurred several years earlier. The investigator found that Harold had given inconsistent accounts regarding how Lynn ended up trapped under the car. In some instances, Harold claimed Lynn was looking for a lug nut when the accident happened, while in others, he said she was trying to retrieve a flashlight she had accidentally dropped. Harold also changed his story about their plans at the time of the incident. Sometimes he said they were about to go out for dinner, and other times he claimed they had already eaten and were heading home. Investigators stated that they found some inconsistencies in Harold's story and decided to examine his relationship with Tony more closely. A family nanny, Schott, reported that Tony and Harold slept in separate rooms and that Harold occasionally traveled for work. He would go on these trips, but he didn't bring any luggage, and then he just showed up the next day, Schott said. She wondered if Harold was having an affair. He seemed to have a secret life. They also encountered difficulties in finding concrete evidence of his fundraising activities, which were not available online. Local authorities and journalists also received 17 anonymous letters highlighting the fact that Harold's first wife, Lynn, was crushed under their car while he was changing a tire on the side of the road, according to Harold. Authorities ruled it an accident, but when Tony also died, family, friends, and investigators noticed striking similarities. They mentioned that he had also taken out insurance on his wife and found that he had received $600,000 after Lynn died. Investigators noted that Harold had taken out 3 $1.5 million insurance policies on Tony during their 12 years together. After Tony's death, their daughter Haley stated that Harold tried to control her reactions after informing her of what had happened. According to Haley, this controlling behavior continued at home. She mentioned that she had to ask for his permission before she could have a snack or play with a toy. At a bail hearing the following week, a judge denied Harold bail, declaring him a substantial flight risk because he still had access to a large sum of money, including Tony's assets. While Harold was in prison, Haley was adopted by her mother's brother, Barry, and his wife, Paula. Harold insisted that he frequently traveled for work, but further investigation revealed that these claims were false. The agents found no tax returns, pay stubs, or any evidence showing that Harold had been employed since 1995. This discovery raised doubts about Harold's reliability and increased suspicion regarding his activities. On November 6, 2014, 2 years after Tony's death in Rocky Mountain National Park, Harold was arrested and charged with murder. He pleaded not guilty. Meanwhile, Tony's family wanted to take custody of Haley, Tony's daughter, but Harold, who was in jail, denied their request. 10 months after Harold was arrested, he went on trial in 2015 for the murder of his second wife, Tony. Although there was no forensic evidence linking him to her death, the prosecution presented several pieces of evidence to build their case. First, they highlighted that Harold had taken out multiple life insurance policies on Tony, suggesting that he had planned to kill her for financial gain. They also provided evidence of cell phone activity in the area weeks before Tony's death, indicating that Harold was searching for a discrete location to carry out his scheme. Additionally, the prosecution showed a map found in Harold's car, marked with a large X at the location where Tony fell from the cliff. They argued that this map demonstrated Harold's intention to use this spot to execute his plan. The prosecution's strongest evidence focused on the circumstances surrounding the death of Harold's first wife, Lynn, which raised suspicions. The striking similarities between Lynn's death and that of his second wife, Tony, led the jury to believe that Harold had a pattern of behavior indicating his guilt. After a 10-day trial, the jury deliberated and found Harold Henthorn guilty of murdering Tony Henthorn, concluding that the similarities between the two cases pointed to his responsibility. Consequently, Harold was sentenced to life in prison, where he will remain for the rest of his life. Although he was never charged with Lynn's murder, many believe he is also culpable for her death. In December 2015, custody of Haley, the daughter of Tony and Harold, was granted to Tony's oldest brother. In 2023, Harold Henthorn attempted to appeal his conviction, but the appeal was dismissed. He also filed for post-conviction relief, claiming ineffective assistance from his defense attorney. Harold contended that his attorney failed to meet constitutional standards and was not adequately prepared for the trial. However, the court rejected his request for relief, determining that his attorney had provided a sufficient defense consistent with constitutional requirements for a fair trial. Harold Henthorn's unsettling story serves as a powerful warning about the risks posed by people who seem charming. His talent for charming and deceiving others underscores the need to be cautious and skeptical when dating or forming relationships. This case is a cautionary tale for anyone in similar situations, urging them to be careful and reach out to trustworthy people for support.